There we go. How's the technical details going? We're all good to go? And, oh, I should have, David, did you want to say a quick word? I think that David will perhaps be your alternate to this committee at some point in time in the future.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure how that'll work out, but I would just like to welcome everyone, and I'm happy to sit here and listen in and by way of support.
Awesome. Thanks, David.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
So we have our agenda. Is everyone done all right with accessing their agenda? All your communications are working okay? Started at the basic level here. So I'll call our meeting to order with an acknowledgement that we are respectfully meeting on the traditional territory of the Lekwungen speaking people. And we're honored to have the opportunity to build working relationships with people of Songhees and Wisconsin nations. They have a whole lot of knowledge, and really hope that they will share more knowledge with us. They've already shared through some events that I've had the pleasure to attend. Learned a lot of things from our First Nations neighbors, and I'm looking forward to being able to learn more from them. So our agenda tonight is basically public participation, followed by one real item of business. And I'm looking for a approval of the agenda. We just need a mover, no seconder. Moved by Councillor Jordison. Is everyone in agreement with the agenda? Anything you wanted to add? No, great, thank you. All in favor then? That's carried, thank you. So our new business is, public participation, although I see only staff in the audience. Was there anyone online? No, okay, great, thank you. So we will move on. Just for your information, there are some bylaws that have been subject to a public hearing, and those are noted on the agenda as things that we are not able to receive new information on. Just procedurally, that's the little caveat that council has to follow in order to follow the proper procedure under the provincial legislation. So our new business 4.1 is the infrastructure committee terms of reference. And Amanda, did you want to bring up the little motion? Just because I've been really sick over Christmas, and our meeting dates sometimes have been sort of problematic for work reasons or whatever. I really think it's important that we allow for there to be a couple of changes. The first change is to move our meeting from Tuesday during the day, the second Tuesday of each week, to the evening time, so that we don't have work conflicts with members of council. And so I'm looking to recommend to council that we have 5 community members, as we do here tonight, and that we amend the time of when we meet, and to add an alternate member in case something crazy happens again, just to make sure that we have what we need to explain what we were suggesting to council when it does come before council. Does anyone object to meeting on the Tuesday in the evening? Is that a problem for anybody? No? And is any, oh, go ahead, sorry. To remember to do these things now.
So just for clarity, what we're looking at in the agenda, that's the existing terms of reference, and you're looking to change that.
Just because the time of the meeting was originally set for 2:30, and that doesn't work for all the members of council in order to attend.
Understood. Well, I count 7 staff members here who are in here in the evening instead of during the day. So that's certainly an inconvenience, probably a cost, I'm not sure. So I wonder if it's, you know, where's the bigger inconvenience? I guess is the question, is you sort of add a council who, you know, have to give up some work time, I guess, to make afternoon meetings versus staff who have to attend evening meetings. How do we make that balance and, you know, be on a recommendation like this?
So part of that balance is that this committee only meets 4 times a year.
Mhm.
So it is less often, and we're trying to bring a more organized system, but there are an awful lot of meetings that take place during the day. And so it just in our juggling, it wasn't working. So I guess there certainly is, it cuts both ways.
Yeah. I guess the other question is, how do you balance that?
Mhm.
And again, you think there's a need for, so currently you're a member and Councillor Jordanson is an alternate, is that what it is? And you're suggesting that be changed to,
No, the terms of reference were included with the agenda, but we're 2 members of council sit on the committee, a chair and another member of council. And then I'm just suggesting that we have an alternate so that there will be 2 members of council here, so that when it comes to council, the theory behind that is that when it goes to council, you need a mover and a seconder. So infrastructure being quite important, I thought there should be 2 people who were able to bring that forward at council.
fair enough, okay.
Oh,
As a suggestion to Stuart's idea, and this would be an administrative thing, I'm sure Colwood could consider time off in lieu of, so the day of the meeting, for instance, staff are allowed to go home earlier than come back for the meeting, and it's costing Colwood nothing.
I believe
you.
there is that in place already. And let's see, Kim.
Thank you. I just wanted to, I guess I understood that there were people on the committee that, you know, work during the day and would rather come in the evenings instead of taking time out of their day that they're not going to get paid for. That was one of the concerns. The other thing I just wanted to mention too was that I was hoping to add something to the terms of reference as well, and it's just something I put on other committee terms of reference, and it's just that the terms of reference be reviewed by the committee during the first meeting of each term. Just every term, yeah. So if that's allowed to be added.
Sure, absolutely. Probably the easiest way for staff is if we make a motion to that effect. I put my recommendation up just so that everybody could see what I was thinking in black and white. If you want to change it or you want to add to it, I'm happy to accept that. But we do need a mover. And Stuart, your microphone is still on. I just wonder if you want to speak more. Yeah. We're both still learning this system. Any comments from anyone else on the motion? You're happy, not happy? What do you feel about it? Do you want to make a motion?
So are you making a motion on this?
I'm happy. This was just my recommendation. I'm happy to do whatever suits the majority of members. I'm not married to it. It was just trying to figure out a way that it can work and flow. I should have to get used to this chairing business again.
Rob, just two comments. One is I think evenings make sense, just for the work purpose, but also, you know, we don't have any public here right now, but public participation is probably easier in the evenings, or at least viewership to watch what's going on. So I think that's a good idea. And if there's an opportunity to deal with staff being here at night and not having any cost, then that's even better. With respect to the additional amendment recommending that we review these every term, it's a 4-year term. I'm just wondering if that aligns with when potentially a new council could be in, and if we should be maybe having a more frequent review of these terms of reference with respect to when a new council is in, maybe every year, just to make sure that we're all on the same page. Vice every 4 years, it just seems like a long time.
Yeah, so the 4-year term is set to reflect the municipal election. So if we did it each term, we would be doing it every 4 years. Sort of kind of happens. I guess it didn't always happen, being the one who's been here for a lot of terms, and I would say that does tend to change when the council changes. They tend to make changes to what committees they want to have and what their structure might look like. It doesn't always change, but does sometimes change. So I think it makes sense to do it periodically. It certainly probably makes sense to do it every time after an election. And it probably might even make sense to do it more often than that, just to give people the opportunity to think about it. Is this working? Is there a better way? And I see Ashley.
Just a thought on the review of the term, maybe at the end of the term, the last meeting, the committee reviews it and recommends how it might change, because coming in as a new committee, we don't really know what's working well and what's not working well. So when we're going out, maybe we can make some recommendations, and if it has to change with the new committee coming in, then that can be done as well. But
Yeah, I think I like that idea too. How about we put be reviewed at the end of every term with recommendations for potential improvements. Thank you for seeing when I'm not seeing.
While we're on this subject, I'm starting to wonder if 4 times a year is actually enough. This is a very important stage in Colwood's history. There's a lot of growth going on, and I'm sure staff have a lot of projects going on. And I don't want to be seen as holding staff up on certain projects until it comes through the committee. And this committee is all encompassing. It's got a lot of things to deal with. And I'm thinking, boy, if we're meeting once every 3 months, that's a long time between meetings. And I'm wondering if we have the flexibility, if it's necessary, to hold more meetings where we can get into certain topics in more depth and give it more detail, so we can give better recommendations. Because I don't know, every 3 months is a long time.
Yeah, it is a long time. Amanda.
So special meetings can be called at any time if required. If items come up, that's an option, so that you have your set for meetings for sure. And then if items come up, you can call a special meeting.
And I don't want to get too far ahead without giving staff a chance to speak to this as well, because we are working in partnership here with staff who are working very hard to try to make good things happen. And I don't want to preach without listening. But I do think that also as a committee, members may want to get together to just get more comfortable with some issues and kind of workshop things in order to be ready for these meetings with staff, where we want to actually, be coherent and make sense. So that may be something that we need to look at being able to do from a committee standpoint of getting ourselves up to speed, but at the same time, perhaps not burdening staff with another, meeting. So I just wanted to open it up to staff if you had any comments on the way that the committee might be most helpful to you, and whether or not you feel that the evening meetings are a problem for you.
Thank you, Councillor Day. I would never say evening meetings are a problem. That's part of what we do. We work during the day, we work at night as needed. Staff are compensated fairly, and whether it's with time or money, it's important work that we do, and when we do it really should be irrelevant. And I think if we're gonna philosophically engage the public and be transparent, then I think it's a consideration, but truly it's about when's convenient to get the work done. So every 3 months, I think, is great as far as being able to keep the committee informed with what we do day to day. And I think that first meeting that we had where we talked about some of our guiding documents and all of those things as a precursor to the work that you'll do in front of us works great. And I think along the way, if we end up having some, and I've worked in these committee structures before, we have these workshops where you bring in all the committees and talk about certain foundational documents to give the committee members ideas of what's going on. Because there's other committees that are doing other works that you're not part of that you might want to be interested in with regards to what they're doing. So there's opportunities like that. And certainly the special meetings, I think council at their discretion will call those special meetings when staff brings something forward from a technical point of view where they'd like to get a public opinion from it, and council has that discretion at any time to do that. So that special meeting and that flexibility can work as well. And quite frankly, if we're meeting during the day, then we're quite often doing some other work in the evening. So we're good either way. So I think the structure and what you're suggesting here works well for staff.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. Looking just to Councillor Jordison. Keep forgetting that I have to do
Sorry,
it.
I can move the recommendation or
Okay. So we have a recommendation. It's written up for us all. Councillor Jordison has moved it. Does anyone have anything that they would like to pull out and talk about? Is everyone comfortable if I call the vote? Is there anyone opposed to this motion? Seeing none, I will call that carried. So we are back to our main agenda, and our next item is the Subdivision and Development Servicing Bylaw number 2000. Who would like to introduce this?
Thank you, Councillor Day. You had mentioned earlier in the evening about conversation and talking about various items. So we're open to doing that prior to the presentation or after the presentation, whichever works better. I think it's probably, from Aaron's perspective, he's been the driving force behind this, and he has been working doggedly over a couple of years and a couple of administrative changes, which does lead to a change in what the presentation looks like and where it goes. So I know Aaron's excited about getting up here and eventually getting this bylaw passed. He's one of the key people that works with this bylaw with developers, and it's truly a document that allows us to create some certainty 90% of the time when dealing with these developers. So that really helps them to understand what our expectations are. The current document is so old that it's almost obsolete to the point that it's useless, which causes a lot of conflict, a lot of extra meetings and so on. So hopefully tonight's Aaron presentation will help show you why this is a very necessary update. He spent a lot of time on it, and I think I've done these a few times in other municipalities, and Aaron has done an outstanding job, and I'm looking forward to his presentation tonight. So at your discretion of the committee, we can either go through the conversation first and then have the presentation, or let Aaron have the presentation and then see where that conversation leads. We're good either way.
Okay. Aaron, what would your preference be? Would you like to do your spiel and then hear from us, or hear from us and then do your spiel?
I think maybe presentation first and then
Okay.
discussion.
Okay, that's good with me. May as well give the guy who worked so hard on it for 2 years the first kick at the cat here. I think you are gonna have to push your button for your mic when you're ready. There you go.
We're good now. All right, thank you, Councillor Day, and thank you for the kind words, John. It has been a long time coming. I have been working on this, a few different versions of it, and I gotta say this one is the most, I'm most proud of this one. I think we've made very good strides, and so yeah, I'm very pleased to be presenting the Subdivision and Development Servicing Bylaw. I just kind of want to start off with a little bit of background, as John alluded to. We are dealing with a current bylaw that is quite outdated. That's Subdivision Bylaw 285. The proposed bylaw we are proposing is a MMCD supplement bylaw. So it will supplement the MMCD, and the MMCD is the Master Municipal Construction Documents. Where basically the MMCD will become, is it not? Oh, oh, I thought, yeah, I guess I could tell you. Can I control it? Okay.
You have the power.
Nice. Yeah, so the MMCD will become sort of the base document, our guiding document, if we choose to adopt it, where the supplemental bylaw, the proposed Subdivision Development Bylaw 2000 will be a supplement with special the standards that are sort of historical and specific to the city that aren't mentioned in the MMCD. The approach of adopting the MMCD as our guiding document, our base document, as John sort of alluded to, it's a well-known document throughout the construction industry. So everybody's familiar with the specifications, the details. So it makes it very easy for staff to provide those details at a design level, as well as during construction. If we're trying to solve a problem in the field, they can pull out a detailed drawing that they're familiar with, and it's very useful. The bylaw's also been written to capture our goals and objectives. Some of those are supporting the multimodal active transportation, which our current bylaw doesn't speak to that at all. We're improving pedestrian and cycling safety, developing better sidewalk and cycling connectivity, and integrating design standards with BC Transit, as well as following sustainable infrastructure design and improved stormwater management practices, which again, our current bylaw is silent on stormwater management. So we already have to rely on MMCD's guidelines to review plans that are proposed to the city.
Can I just ask you a question about that MMCD? Because that for me is that's a new term for me to understand. And I can see that you're taking that set of standards and kind of adding in our transportation master plan and our active transportation plan, and kind of trying to, plug in all those pieces that we've been working with. But the one part that is kind of eluding me is the environmental piece, because we're talking a lot in Colwood since the OCP was adopted. The 2018 OCP talked about doing, the name always escapes me, a site adaptive planning principles, right? But when we get to things like this bylaw, we are doing that thing that kind of annoys me about when we look at maps and the ocean planning documents in general, is that it's this big white piece of paper with little black lines, and this part is going to be this. as if nothing exists there already, right? But we know that with site adaptive planning principles, we've got to somehow put together what's already there, and from a First Nations perspective has existed for an extremely long time, with what we want to put there now, and somehow make that. So how does that work with MMCD? Because I don't really know what MMCD is.
Yeah, I would say the MMCD maybe captures it in a general sense of, stormwater management, that sort of tree protection sort of aspect, but not specific to site adaptive. I do know that in the bylaw, we have a statement in here that speaks to designing with site adaptive concepts when you're submitting designs to the city.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the limit of what is in the bylaw now, in the proposed bylaw.
Okay.
So yeah, if we're looking at looking to add more specificity, then we would have to add it elsewhere. Yeah, I was just going to call you up. So just from a
I know, I
philosophical
always have
point
the
of view,
hard
I
questions.
had said earlier about the 90%. That 10% is that site adaptive piece. So site adaptive is fairly new, and we're still struggling with it now. And when we're designing these roads and so on, the MMCD will say, for instance, you can only build a road that's so steep.
Yeah.
And you can only build a road that has a certain amount of crossfall. A typical design before site adaptive would have taken their site and tried to do what we call a cut fill balance. Try to take the dirt you're going to cut out and put it into the dirt you need to fill in, so that you don't have to truck it off site or truck it on site. So that's a great thing. But when you do that, you tend to get nice grades so that you can have wheelchair access, bike grades that are palatable for cyclists and all of that. So you're meeting that goal. When you go to site adaptive and the terrain, like in Colwood and Triangle Mountain, is like this, site adaptive means you don't change that grade, and you cut what you need to cut, or you fill what you need to fill, and you then don't meet greenhouse gases because you're trucking potentially tens of thousands of cubic meters off site. So you have to decide which one is your piece that you're going to say leads us in this particular site. Are we going to use active transportation and not have a 12% grade? Because nobody will cycle a 12% grade.
Mhm.
Are we going to have pedestrian friendly for wheelchair access? Because you can't have a 7 or 8% grade, so you got to get down to 4%. But to take this to 4%, that means we've got to cut it all out and not adapt the site. So those are all those little pieces that we start with this plan of do what the MMCD says. And then when we show up to this particular site each time, we'll now see what we can do to adapt. And then that's that balance of, do we go for active transportation? Do we go for accessibility? Do we go for environmental? Do we go for storm ability? So it allows them to start with an iterative process of, this is what we think we should do. And then we look at that site and we change it. So the MMCD allows them to start the process and get the majority of it done. And then we tweak it to our needs. So that's the kind of iteration where we may come back to this committee and say, which way would you like us to go? Do you want us to really lead towards site adaptive? Do you want us to really lead towards accessibility? Do you want us to lead towards active transportation? These are the gives and takes of that conversation. But the MMCD allows us to start that conversation by giving them the vast majority of the plan. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense, though. The one thing that isn't getting translated in that, though, is that there's kind of this baseline of what would you call them? Free services that our natural systems provide to us: stormwater drainage, carbon sequestration, all of these things that exist on the land currently today as it sits.
Right.
But when we're bringing that into a planning perspective, we're not really able, as far as I can tell, except in special instances where it's really obvious that, this is a river, or this is a lake, or, this is a foreshore, that we really get clearly an understanding of all those services that are being provided to us. And so my perspective is I'm just worried that we are, you know, a lot of development is taking place and we're doing the best we can with what we've got for sure. But, you know, we are increasingly dealing with heat domes and stormwater major events and, you know, king tides and things going on. And that resiliency that we've kind of just relied on and expected to always be there is perhaps being modified, but not quantified in any way. So I'm just trying to find a way that we can at least begin to try to acknowledge the services that are already here in our community and that probably cost less if we use them than if we replace them with man-made solutions.
Yeah, there's no doubt that that is part of that equation of balance of site adaptive, accessibility, greenhouse gases, the environment, sustainability with regards to natural resources, 100%. And
Yeah.
that's where a one size fit all like the MMCD cannot address that globally
Yeah,
across the
yeah,
city. So that's when we
exactly.
come back to each individual site and assess it as it comes at us. And that's
Yeah.
the best we can do at this point.
Okay. Oh, I see a Stuart. Go ahead.
Thank you, Councillor Day. Good points, but I guess the way I would look at it, and I'm a supporter of what's been done here. I think it's a good job. Is that things like the site adaptive planning and that level of, you know, should you develop a site? Critical questions, but actually, if you're going to develop a site, how you do it, I think falls into this thing. You know, boring details. I hate to, you know, knock my old profession and some of the others, but I mean, how you build a catch basin really is not whether you should develop or not, but if you're going to develop, do it right. And here's how you do it right. But I think the bigger picture questions, and frankly, as an engineer, it took me a long time to actually accept this, is not in the details. It's in the bigger picture, the planning, and should you develop it? Should you zone that piece of property? Should you go here or not? So I don't want to knock what you're talking about because it's all really important stuff. But what we're talking about here tonight is really the nitty-gritty details of how you're going to do it if you're going to do it. So as I said, I'm a supporter of what's been done here. I think it's a good job. And have a few comments, but basically, I think we don't want to lose sight of it or try to make this something that it isn't.
For sure.
Thank you.
Yeah. Ashley.
Just kind of to, as someone who's worked with an MMCD supportive servicing bylaw as well, I don't know specifically, but I assume you guys have preliminary applications come in. So at that stage in the planning review, the engineering department would have their opportunity to review it site specifically and provide their comments. So this bylaw would kind of set the baseline for what the expectations are for what the optimal standard is. And if you're being site adaptive, you're going to realize, okay, this is a really steep slope. We're not going to be able to achieve that. So the engineering department can recommend specifically for that site what they want to happen there. So this sets the expectations kind of for stormwater management to ensure that environmental protection as a baseline, and then you can build on it from there.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Carry on.
very well said. Yeah, I was just going to jump in and say exactly what you said is like, engineering does get involved in a preliminary level at the very beginning when a development is under rezoning or going for a DP. And that's where we do assess the property with, you know, grades and topology and trees and water courses and all that. So that's kind of where we would attack it at that point. And that's not really involving, you know, this bylaw at that point in a detail manner. So
Yeah, I find for sure. I'm just trying to figure out where does that fit? You know, where do I solve that problem? Because I've been watching it for 20 years now. And it probably it's maybe even more critical right now because there's so much pressure for housing, you know, that we have this housing crisis and that is pretty much everything everywhere all the time right now. And I understand those pressures, they're real. It's not, you know, it's not wrong. It's just, how do we do this the right way?
find that balance. Yeah.
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay. I'll go
Carry
back
on.
to just finishing off on the background. Some of the important improvements that are going to be added into the new proposed bylaw that are not in the old bylaw are updated road cross sections, buffered and separated bike lanes, wider sidewalks, landscape boulevards with boulevard trees and irrigation systems that are controlled by the city, and as well as updated drawing standards and GIS submission requirements for as-built so that we can put them into our base mapping for better asset management. So if I can go to the next one. So here's where I sort of touch on why MMCD, what is it? You know, we have basically touched on it, that it's a standardized guideline for construction details and specifications. It's widely used within the industry. It's going to provide the city more consistency and efficiencies. You know, we're not going to have to debate what type of catch basin or manhole they have to install. It's just going to be in the bylaw, and it's going to be, everyone's going to know what they're installing. So my design time will go way down for reviewing, because it seems to be back and forth right now. And then I've added just like one of the standard detail drawings up here on the right-hand side of the screen. And it's just for a standard manhole, MMCD. And you can see sort of the level of detail that's encompassed in that we're able to provide that consultant or the contractor, and they know exactly what we want them to build. So it's definitely going to be handy for the city to have updated standards like this. It'll streamline quite a lot of processes.
Yeah, you can go out there with your book and say, that is not this.
Yep. So moving on to the updated road cross sections. These have come a long way from the cross sections that are in our old bylaw. You can see the ones in our old bylaw 285 on the left-hand side, and then the new updated ones on the right-hand side. We've developed these cross sections, accounting for the transportation master plan, as well as the new draft active transportation network plan, by including wider sidewalks and on two sides of the street. As you'll notice, the local road actually on these ones here, it has on two sides street, but the local road in our old bylaw only has a sidewalk on one side. Now we're proposing it's on two sides. We're going to have buffered and protected bike lanes, as I mentioned previously. Center medians, we don't have a cross section that recognizes center medians with left-hand turn lanes. So that's always a negotiation. You know, what does the median look like and how big is it and all that. On-street parking bays, again, we don't have that type of detail in our bylaw right now. So we're going to be able to have that and give some guidelines of where we're going to want them, where they shouldn't be. You know, obviously on local roads, we're going to want to see more of them. And then maybe on arterial roads, we're not going to want to see very many because we want traffic to keep flowing. As well, you know, wider right of ways. Our current bylaw really only recognizes, I think it's up to 22.5 meters right away. And the new bylaw is going to be up to 30 to allow for those instances like Souk Road, where we're going to need multiple lanes, possibly dedicated bus lanes, you know, if we get to that point.
We have a couple of questions. Are you all right if we do them as we go?
Yep.
Okay, Roger.
Oh, thank you. This is sort of near and dear to me, and I'm starting to wonder if we're putting the cart before the horse. Council, to my understanding, hasn't seen the new active transportation network plan yet. They haven't approved it, and yet you're bringing it into a bylaw. And the same with the master transportation plan. I think the master transportation plan should be the umbrella with the active transportation network plan underneath it. And it seems we're using the active transportation network plan to drive the transportation network plan. To me, this is all backwards. And I'm very concerned because I've been speaking to a lot of people in Colwood. They're not happy with the road widths. And I would like to recommend, although I see nothing wrong, I would like to see bike lanes wide. I would like to see them protected. I would like to see sidewalks even wider. But the reality is we only have so much road width. And it seems that the traffic lanes are taking the hit for a gold standard in the active transportation network plan. And I think we have to accommodate everything. And maybe we, instead of having the gold standard, we may have to look at the bronze or silver standard. So to ask for support for a new bylaw without actually seeing that council has supported the new proposed active transportation network plan or the active transportation plan, I think is backwards. And I think we've got to make that settlement first before we move into this, is my thought anyway.
Okay, thank you for that. I think I'm gonna call up John. He's the expertise on this one.
Thank you. Those are valid points. And actually, I can say that because council has changed that direction. So we are just in the early stages of our transportation master plan. And council has specifically not adopted the active transportation network plan because they haven't said this, but staff is seeing that it's likely going to occur, that it will come under the umbrella of the transportation master plan. What I want to suggest is that what you're seeing up here is what we have the potential to build, not what we have to build. This does not tell us that we have to build that cross section. This tells us that what our expectation from the developer is that if we ask you to protect it, here's why, because it's in here. We'll decide how wide the protection is. We'll decide how wide the sidewalk is. We'll decide how wide the bike lane is. We'll decide whether it's protected or buffered at our discretion. This bylaw gives us the authority to make those decisions. By not adopting this bylaw now, we're back to that, well, what gives you authority to say so? And we go with, well, the OCP says they'd like to have a nice place to ride a bike. And they go, well, that doesn't mean it has to be protected. So we're constantly having this push and this pull. And what usually wins out is that this iterative process takes time. And then they go, we got to get this built. And we'll go, well, you're the ones arguing with us, so it's going to take time. And they've got money on the line month to month. This gives us certainty of progress, and it gives us certainty of what it looks like, but it also gives us the flexibility to determine that. So although we haven't got the TMP in place, and although we haven't adopted the active transportation network plan, we can take the philosophies behind it and then build exactly what suits the purposes. During the transportation master plan engagement process, that's the time for the public to talk about whether they want a gold standard or a silver standard or a bronze standard. And then we'll go take that information, and council ultimately will direct staff to what that looks like. But we'll do that through a public engagement process. And that process is going to take us 12 to 18 months, perhaps 24 months, depending on how much engagement we decide to do with regards to the public. But I rest assured that this committee will be a part of that process, and the public in general will definitely be part of that process. So I hope that helps alleviate some of your concerns.
So John, I understand.
Oh, what happened there? There we go.
Thank you. So if I'm understanding you correctly, these measurements are basically a guideline. And there will be flexibility within, for Colwood anyway, to alter those dimensions. So we won't be held 2 years, well, we can't do this as the bylaw, and this is the way we have to do it. Am I correct in that?
I mean, up there, we don't have dimensions on there, but right now, I think we're running our bike lanes anywhere from 1.8 to 2.1, I think. We're running our sidewalks anywhere from 1.8 to 2.4. And in the case of a multi-use pathway, 4 meters. So all of those things give us the ability to go, okay, in this particular case, because part of it is, although we say an arterial is 25 meters wide, we have lots of arterials that aren't 25 meters wide. So we can't fit that cross section in there with those widths. So then we say, okay, what are we going to give up? Are we going to give up boulevard? Are we going to give up bike lane? Are we going to give up protection? Are we going to give up buffering, like all of those decisions will come into that because we may not be able to acquire enough land. We might say, for instance, we won't have sidewalks on both sides. We'll just have a multi-use path on one side. This allows us to start that conversation and have the authority to do so at our flexibility. All right.
And next I have Kim.
Hi, John. Yeah, so I just wanted to explain, I think Roger's point and just the frustration with the community. I think it's hard for people that don't know what they don't know. And I think to make the roadways tighter and what the research is saying about that and how it's important to slow traffic down and that sort of thing. So I think if that information is provided, it might at least assist in people understanding why they are getting tighter. I don't know, because most people want them to be wider so they can turn in buses and that sort of thing. And then also the boulevards, like I think we need to consider if we're making a boulevard a lot wider that we're having to maintain that boulevard. And so there's cost involved in that, right? So there's that, the pull and push. And then with the sidewalks, 2-meter sidewalks are great, but if we go that route and there's lamp standards or hydro poles in it, and we're just going to leave them there, it doesn't make sense to make the 2-meter sidewalk because it's defeating the purpose. So there's all these factors in it. So I guess what would be nice if there's some sort of guideline to it. We've talked about this quite in depth too, where there's some areas that maybe we can't get a full 2-meter sidewalk. So we go down to 1.5 around to get around a bend or something. And so just to be able to have that flexibility would be helpful, and ensuring that, the fire trucks and the emergency vehicles have the laneways. I think a lot of people view it as you should start at the road. You make the road a certain size and then the rest goes out. I'm not the expert. This just things that I've heard. And so I just think just the flexibility is really important.
Yeah. I think if we design these right, nobody would be happy. But more importantly, nobody would be angry, right? It is about a compromise, right? Because that's really what we have to do. We have to get everybody to get something out of it. And that means you're not going to get perfection, but you should get something that works for most of the community most of the time. And that's really what we're trying to achieve when we're doing this. So hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, I think also that there is really some the level of understanding too with our bylaw. This bylaw is what tells our developers what they must give to the city. This does not tell the city what it must do with the land that we get from the developers.
Correct.
So council gets to massage the plan, but we're giving kind of a rationale for why developers need to give us what we ask for.
And most of the time, council gives us enough direction through guiding documents that we can do our job day to day. Occasionally, we need to come back and use committees or use council to get a little more information to say, okay, how do you want us to best serve you in this instance?
Yeah, you bring
because
us
it's
all the
outside that
sticky
line,
bits.
right? And that's part of that.
And then
iteration.
Taylor is also wanting to add to the conversation.
Yeah, Roger's points are really great, and comments that you just made kind of ring in my ears a little bit. You're saying this is what they must give to the city, but not necessarily what we need to do. My only concern is maybe I missed it in the bylaw. Is it explicit in here that or is there a way to add a provision to capture kind of what Roger's saying here, right? This is to get something out and updated right now because it's pressing and we have something. Let's do that.
Yep.
But let's make it very clear and explicit in this bylaw that it is going to be informed by and fall under the master transportation plan and the ANTP when that's approved. Just because if I pick this up as a developer, which I'm not, and I see something in here that looks pretty official, then it's going to be quite frustrating when you turn around and say, well, no, we actually don't have an approved master transportation plan, and this is going to change, and this is just a nice updated schematic, but it's not necessarily what it is. So again, maybe I missed it, but if it's not explicitly in here that this is going to fall under something that is yet to come, and this is just a step in the right direction, I think maybe there's room to do that to make it more palatable to everybody.
One of the nice things we have is the ability to make the rules as we go. It is our land, it is our authority. So constant, like, again, right now, what we're trying to do is improve that process, but it doesn't mean the process doesn't work for us now. We have a transportation master plan now. The problem, the transportation master plan is outdated and doesn't do what we need it to do. So what we're doing now is we'll have a discussion, and Aaron will have several discussions, and they'll keep pushing. And then Joshua, our manager of engineering, has to get involved, and they'll keep pushing. And then finally I have to get involved. That takes time. Sooner or later, I or somebody above me or council says no. And that's because I'll take the transportation master plan and I'll say, I realize that Souk Road says in the transportation master plan, it's only 2 lanes. But that ship sailed a long time ago. It's going to be 4 lanes 30 years from now. So we're going to take 30 meters of land, not 20, even though that's what it says in the transportation master plan. And they push on that and they push, and then eventually they back off. And because we've had these other discussions with council, we've been able to stand on that because we had a Souk corridor study where we haven't gotten ultimate authority, but I have enough authority with regards to council's direction that I'm confident in telling that I'm not going to say yes. If you're going to try to get a yes out of the city, you're going back to council to get the yes. Because what I feel council has told me right now is that Souk Road's a 30-meter corridor. They haven't told me what they want it to look like, and they haven't confirmed that, but they have said to me, don't stop doing that. For all intents and purposes. I have 2 councillors here that are nodding their head. So I think I'm headed in the right direction with regards to that. So we do get to make the rules. We're just trying to make the game easier for everybody for now. But ultimately we have that. And there are sections in there and comments in there that says we base this on guiding documents such as the transportation master plan and these other things. So we do have that in there to make it easier. In my career, I haven't been in front of a lawyer fighting over these things because, like I say, time's too important to them for them to go down that path. But ultimately they could pick that path, and the city doesn't lose very often. And that's not just Colwood, that's municipalities in British Columbia. So they generally don't go down that path for that reason.
Great. And Ashley?
Yeah, I was just looking through the draft bylaw and I see there's specific sections in the guidelines that say that the director of engineering may approve something alternate, but it might make it more clear if in just the main body of the bylaw that there's an explicit alternate that the director of engineering may require or consider alternative service levels based on environmental aspects, et cetera, et cetera. And then it's just clear and upfront.
Yeah.
And Kim.
Sorry, John, this might sound like a really silly question, but eventually when the master transportation plan, the active transportation plan, we've kind of narrowed it down to where it needs to get. Will this come forward again and then be updated to be the same standards and we're all following kind of the same parameters?
If council goes down that path, that's certainly something we can do. You may decide to leave it flexible. You may have, for instance, we're going through the traffic model, right? That's going to influence, for instance, what Machosen's going to look like, what Latoria is going to look like. So in that instance, we may bring those up front and put them in the transportation master plan. And if they're in there, then it's as good as being in here. So we may not bring them into here. But if we feel like we really want to be upfront and authoritative about it, then we can bring them and put them right into here. But either way, we can make that occur. So that'll be a conversation we'll have with council at that time to see if they want to incorporate them directly in or have them referred to and referenced in and keep them outside of that bylaw. Sometimes that flexibility is a little nicer so that you don't have to keep coming back to council because it's a bylaw variance, as opposed to the transportation master plan gives us all we need if we've got specific direction, which is kind of nice as well. So that'll be at council's discretion at the time. And Councillor Jordanson, I would encourage you to ask any question you have. Your level of knowledge as a councillor is significantly more than the public's level of knowledge. So any question you ask, and I'm sure at various times, various public members appreciate you asking it so they don't have to. So I don't think you'll come up with a silly question.
I appreciate the way that we're having this conversation too, though, because we are all, doesn't matter how long you've been here, there's always some crazy little tidbit that can trip you up. You know, there's a lot of bylaws that are all talking about pretty much the same piece of land. from a macro perspective. So we're trying to get it right. We're trying to communicate both to developers and the community what we're trying to achieve and why. And it's all based on doing something that's kind of hard to do. Colwood was developed, cars first, people last. And we have flipped that on its head and we've said people first, cars last. And there is a conflict there. There just is. And it doesn't matter if you're in a car or you're a pedestrian, it's a conflict. If the pedestrians are going first, the cars are going to wait longer. If the cars are going first, the pedestrians are going to wait longer. That's the reality. So I'll let you carry on.
That wraps up the background and the cross sections. So moving on, I did touch on, we're introducing some active transportation infrastructure elements into the bylaw, which did not exist or do not exist in the current bylaws. Again, such as the wider sidewalks, improved sidewalk ramps with tactile treatments, multi-use pathways, shared and marked crosswalks for cyclists and pedestrians, much like the crossing at the Goose at Whale and Wolford. That sort of look and feel. Buffered bike lanes, protected bike lanes, and trail construction standards, which we don't have right now. So we have to rely on, old as-built to provide to consultants. They build it like this, please. Landscaping and irrigation standards. Our current bylaw has no standards in it for landscaping, trees, irrigation, plantings, nothing. So this bylaw is going to, by adopting the MMCD and adopting the supplemental bylaw, will have our very own standards to work with developers and consultants during design and making sure that we're getting what we want, where we can get boulevard trees in the right places. We can get either grass, or we're going to go with plantings, or if we want a planted median or not. But it definitely gives us an ability to require those. Right now, it's a bit of a negotiation. So it makes it difficult for staff. So staff are recommending to this committee that you consider the proposed subdivision development bylaw and provide any recommendations to council. And that concludes my presentation. I'm here for more questions. And then, as you know, John's here. And we also have Joshua Bayless, the manager of engineering. He's here to help out as well. And we have Gord Beauvillier, the manager of parks, to answer any questions as well. He's virtual.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so we just lit up the board. Here we go, done.
All right, I'm new to all of this, so this is maybe a little bit of education for myself as well. But first of all, great work on this. It looks like it's been an amazing amount of work compared to what the old development plan was. A large question I have is, there's several plans, there's several objectives that have put in place through the city and with the staff. How does each one influence each other? Because you've got the main permitting development zone for this, but then you've also got your long-term storm management, you get your wastewater, sewage plans, a lot of these other pieces, the environmental pieces that are coming in. How do these all interact to the point where you actually get the right development moving forward? Because I am a little bit curious on how that works. I don't know if that's the right question or worded correctly, but
Yeah, I can take a stab at that, but I'll probably rely on John to maybe add on to what I'm going to say. Like those types of plans that you're speaking of, like the stormwater management master plan, our sewer master plan, even the transportation master plan, those are all going to be hierarchy guiding documents. And this bylaw is pointing towards those. So, this is going to supplement that, but in a more detailed manner. And is that sort of answering your question at all, or? Yeah, let me see if John can add on to that.
I think Mr. Parkinson made a good point earlier tonight about that macro level and that micro level, right? This document here is really about once we decide through other avenues what we want to achieve, this tells them how to achieve it. So there's the what and there's the how. This is really more of a how document. Once we tell you what the storm system is supposed to do and how it's supposed to be accomplished, this tells you how to build it and what our expectations are. During the development process, council makes decision on rezoning and subdivision and development permits and environmental permits and all those bigger documents that talk about drainage, talk about environmental impacts, talk about accessibility, talk about greenhouse gases, talk about our urban forest. All of those things drive the development and what we expect from them. Once that great expectation has kind of been laid out to, okay, this is the game we're going to play. Now this is how we make the game happen. So this is really about achieving the desired results that happened at that macro level down at this micro level to give us that authority. And by having this bylaw, that process, once we get there, is a lot easier because there's a lot more certainty that's created during that process with the new bylaw. Does that make a little more sense?
It does, yeah, thank you. Just carry on, question is, I just see this might be driving a little bit of that.
Oh,
There you go, sorry about that. I turned it off so you can point to you, but it almost feels a little bit like this might be driving some of those other questions and those larger plans. When I look at the stormwater management plan and some of the sizing that has been put in place, and in this development plan as well, it also talks about 10 and 15, 25, 100-year, 200-year events. That's obviously going to change as our world evolves. And how does that drive some of these? Because again, these are very specific and says you have to build out to a certain size in relation to that larger size. But when that changes and you realize that these 100-year events may no longer be 100-year events, they may be 50-year events because of what we're doing to the world. Does that actually start changing or driving each other?
Great question. So this bylaw will give us a new intensity curve for rainfall because the previous bylaw had an older rainfall curve. So that then influences your design of your pipes, your storage capacities, all of those other things. So this is a living document. So as those things change, as council adopts various policies, environmentally, greenhouse gas wise, all of those other pieces, they'll all influence this document. And we will come back, hopefully. How old's this document, Aaron? 285?
Bylaw?
Yeah.
1995.
1995. So
30
the
years.
goal will be to come back less than every 30 years.
Yeah.
So I would anticipate the way things are moving and the way things are progressing so quickly that this bylaw will be amended now in less than every 5 years. Right. And
that was going to be a question that I had too, was when will we next be amending this bylaw again? Because and I just wanted to say thank you for asking the question, Dawn, because that is exactly what myself and a number of other members of council have been struggling with is, well, which one should go first? Like, how do these work together?
And I mean, to Councillor Jordan's point of view with regards to the transportation master plan, that might be the first edit. 18 months from now, we're done that plan and when council makes a decision that they want that to be part of this bylaw. That could be the first edit, right? That quick. So
Yeah, our 2015 plan, I knew the day that we adopted it, that it already needed to be amended, but it was just so much work.
Yeah.
You know, there's only so fast that you can get to everything, right? And we have more people now. All the time. So Ashley, you're up. Try to beat you up. Oh, I blew it. Trying again. There we go.
Just a general question, because when in the design guidelines section, so the general design consideration, it says add the following. Is that referring to adding it to the MMCD?
Yes.
Okay.
Exactly.
When it's great when you have MMCD at your fingertips. When you don't, it's a little more confusing.
Yeah. And that was the direction we got from our consultant.
Yeah.
Was to write it in this manner. It
Yeah.
seems to be the way that they're going in the industry, so.
And again, for staff reviewing it and
Yeah.
for engineers, it's not a problem. And when you're giving those comments, it's fine. It's just like, I'm like, there's something missing, but I don't have the resource to look
Right.
at it. So
Right.
that, I just wanted to double check that because it sounded like it was adding it to the existing.
Maybe we
bylaw,
can
and I-
add that to our little library that we put up so that when people are trying to understand all of our bylaws and rules, that would be something that would be handy because most of us are not. Sorry, Stuart, most of us are not engineers.
Mhm.
I believe it's a subscription based book.
It
and
is,
so
yeah.
It's a difficult thing to give to the public, but I
Oh,
think those
maybe.
specifications, like you get the preliminary application and you're told what to do, and then it's referring to the specification in the bylaw. So it's not like you need it before you have an engineer working on it, really. Yeah. I have other comments, but I'll leave it for people to ask questions for now.
Okay.
I just want to check that. Thank you.
Stuart?
Thank you. No, I wasn't ready.
Take a moment.
Again. I just, firstly, I recognize Roger's point about the chicken and egg thing here, and it's, you know, it's more like a spiral where you're trying to get tighter circles as you go down, but you never actually get to the bottom. You know, you get one more information and you go down another layer and you go down. So it'll never be fully coordinated as much as some of us overly anal people think that would be just perfect, and it should be, and there should be one right answer. So I think we can't really expect to get there. We can do our best, but what we can do is just deal with what's in front of us, you know, and this, as I said earlier, it's more about nitty gritty details than perhaps some of the bigger picture things. But I think there is some influence we could have. I'm wondering, Chair, if we should sort of subdivide our discussions instead of bouncing around any more than necessary, maybe sort of deal with, you know, what do we think about the cross sections, you know, sort of generally, what do we think about the, you know, landscape irrigation, what do we think about some of the details, rather than bounce around a little bit, that might guide things a little more productively. I don't know.
Okay. Well, I'm not quite sure how to do that. There's certainly things that have occurred to me. I was imagining that all of us would have had some things that occurred to them as they were reading the documents, and that we would try to go through it from that perspective. But if anyone has ideas, a way to make it more cohesive, I'm not sure.
Okay, well, let me throw out my thoughts on the cross sections. You know,
Okay.
that's, I think they're a significant part of it, and I like the cross sections. I thought they were good. Some of the philosophies that were reflected in here, which I thought were valuable. You know, we look at the collector road cross sections. Bike lanes on the road make sense. Local road sections, the bike lanes, no bike lanes on local roads, I thought made infinite sense. I liked we had parking shown on one of the cross sections, but that was on the opposite side from the cycling. So that did away with the conflict of parked cars and cyclists, which I think was important. Concern I had, the multi-use pathways adjacent to sidewalks. Here's my concern. I used to be, I think we were politely called mammals, one of these old guys on a bike going too fast. And it was fun. You know, you get, honestly, you know, for those of you that have done it, you know, you get about 10 or 12 people, similar skill sets cycling together. You can have a lot of fun and a lot of laughs, but you can pick up a lot of speed. You look at a sidewalk and you think of people walking their little dogs that are darting around, or kids, stuff like that. I worry about the proximity of a bike multi-use pathway to a sidewalk. You know, we got like 0.3 meter separation or something, or I think a little mountable curb separation. But I think probably at some point, maybe not today, but some point, we should look at a speed limit for cyclists on a multi-use pathway that's adjacent to a sidewalk. I don't know if that's the kind of detail we want to get into here, but that's probably, when I look at these cross sections, that was the only sort of worry I had. I got a little concern about the sloped crosswalk, whatever was shown back here. They had a section.
The elephant feet beside it? like
No,
on Galaxy Zoo?
No, I was talking more about the cross section on a sloping site.
Okay.
And I tried to mark it, I think, whatever it is. And, but it just didn't reflect the issues that we talked about earlier. You know, if we have a sloping site and we have these standards, you know, all these cross sections work perfectly on a dead flat piece of land.
Mhm.
And then we have one in the back that says, well, if you have a slope, here's how you deal with it, and you move the sidewalk right up beside the, I can't put my finger on it right now. You probably have it handy there.
Yeah, it's
R-
page 89 of the bylaw,
Thank you.
yeah,
Yeah,
SSD R16, I think. Is
Yeah.
what you're- Yeah.
yeah, R16. So in fact, it almost contradicts all the cross sections when you look at that. And so I think it's some of the frustrations we've talked about here. How do we marry those two together? You know, everybody says ideally this would be a great little cross section. If we had the right of way, and then somebody says, well, if we have a sloping site, which, you know, we got a lot of sloping sites in Colwood, here's how we deal with it. Well, that to me is a conflict, and it's a kind of conflict where somebody's going to come in with a design and say, no, I meet this sloping site thing. I don't meet your other one. I'd like to find a way to get more clarity, and I don't know how to do that. But as I said, that's was my concern on the cross sections. Otherwise, I thought they were good. You know, we could argue about width of roads and slightly things like that, how wide they have to be. But I think, as John's mentioned, if we say here's what we'd like, and there's tough calls to be made, then that's what he gets paid for. He'll make the tough call, do the best he can.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, the intent of R16 was really more for how to deal with rock cuts and make them safe adjacent to roadways and sidewalks, making sure we have, you know, fall protection on the top of the slope, and potentially even rock fall separation. So that was generally the intent of this one. It's not to dictate what the road looks like. And again, it's that site adaptiveness that this sort of speaks to.
Sort of. Yeah, I guess that,
Yeah,
again.
so page 89 of the bylaw does have the rock cut details.
Mhm.
And I just was trying to look for the one you were mentioning, Stuart, with the steeper bike lane, but
No, this is what I was talking. If you look at page 89, I mean, you can see what it shows is a road. It's got a sidewalk on one side, a slight sidewalk, but how do we deal with all the cross sections and that? It doesn't marry, in my opinion, and maybe others are more skilled than I am. In my opinion, it doesn't really marry with the idealized cross sections that we have at the beginning of the document. You know, so.
yeah, no, and I agree with your point, and there's more implications to that speed limit idea, especially where multi-use pathways are adjacent to cycle lanes, particularly with new technologies like mobility scooters, for one example, can be hooked up to be quite quick, actually, and maybe grandpa and grandma aren't going to be quite as sedentary as we like to think of them as, right? Because I watched a guy like jump the curb and go straight across Super Road at Veterans Memorial Parkway the other day, and I thought, oh my God, maybe he doesn't care if he gets that. I don't know. But there is more speed available to people with smaller and more convenient accessories, let's just call them. And you know, with that don't make sound, that people aren't necessarily expecting, that is going to create conflicts in areas of our roadways that we're going to have to find some way to deal with. And your bike analogy is also useful in thinking about that, in terms of, you know, probably in our brains, whether we have consciously said it out loud or not, we're thinking that the people who are using those multi-use pathways are slower. And if somebody who wants to whiz down the road at car type speeds, they probably should be
In the
adjacent to the
lane.
road.
Yeah.
Yeah, take the lane, right? But when and how should we define that? I guess is the big question for this document that we're trying to adjust here tonight.
Maybe not even in this document. I mean,
Right.
I think it's as you said, it's a whole new thing, and the mobility scooters and, you know, how fast they are,
Electric
whatever
bikes,
you
yeah.
call those little one-wheel things. And people
Yeah,
electric
yeah,
bikes.
yeah.
I just,
I don't even
again,
know
it's
what things are
probably
called anymore.
not critical enough to, you know, worry about too much, except to flag it, I guess, to you and other council members. At some point, I think this is gonna come, and maybe other municipalities will address it first, and you can just copy them. But
Well, it's
just-
been a big bone of contention. Sydney brought it forward to AVICC about 6 years ago now, because they were having a lot of injuries, and people who are using the sidewalks as pedestrians are being injured by mobility scooters, basically. It was you know, getting to the point where, you know, they're a menace. And if you reeled that back maybe another 6 or 8 years, we were talking about skateboards the
Mhm.
same way.
Yeah.
And if you reeled that back even further, you
Rollerblades.
know, it's always whatever the latest trend is. And then conflict zones, you know, our job is to try to find ways to make people safer, but there's not much that we can do about, you know, unfortunately, they're not, we're not injecting people with brain enhancers to get them to just be smarter people. But there isn't an easy way to do it. And it has to, unfortunately, probably get to be a big issue before there's really going to be a big solution.
Yeah.
But we could anticipate some conflicts for sure.
Yeah, I think potentially the street atlas that we are also working on, that would sort of work in the background of this bylaw could assist in that. So we can sort of dictate where we are comfortable with having these multi-use pathways on certain roads with certain volumes of pedestrians / speeds of traffic. So that'll give us an opportunity to play with that matrix.
Yeah, and somebody who's actively dealing with that right now is Vancouver with the seawall and their multi-use pathway that's along the seawall. Because if you're not familiar and you're over there, like the cyclists got to be over on this part and the pedestrians got to be on that part, and the cyclists are only allowed to go this fast, and because they have just so many people using it.
Mhm.
That the conflicts are becoming much more real. So I mean, hopefully there'll be some standards that make sense that could be somewhat universal. All right, I'll stop talking and let somebody else speak. Roger.
Aaron, could you bring up your slides again? Slide on Caspian, I believe it is.
I think it was
Yeah,
like
I'll confirm.
3 back, maybe.
There, I think you
Oh,
got
I
it.
think I passed it. That one?
Yes. I don't know if that is the street, but this, I know you have scallops and cars can park in those areas, but there's nothing stopping vehicles from parking alongside the curb right at the entrance there. In fact, I think that was the street I was on where a car was parked on one side and a UPS truck drove up on the other side and stopped, and I couldn't get through. So if I'm an ambulance driver, I'm stuck. So that's my concern about having these narrow streets. People being people will do the stupidest things. And so they, you know, I only had to wait a matter, probably 30, 40 seconds, and he came out, got in the truck and took off, and I could get through. But in case in point, any emergency vehicle, those 30 or 40 seconds could be the difference between life and death. So when we design these things, if we're going to do it, then I think we're going to have to paint the curbs to stop people from parking against them, because there's nothing there that says they can't. So that was one point. Other point, and this is more directed to John when he was talking about Souk Road, and I was dearly hoping, John, I think you're being very conservative. I think you should go for a little bit more than 30 meters, because by just tweaking the active transportation network cross-section a bit, you have the best of both worlds. You will have 2 bus lanes, 2 lanes of traffic on each side of the road, a bike lane, and a sidewalk. And I don't think you could ask for much more on Souk Road than that. And it just requires, I think I did all the math. I've been studying that for a long time, and it was 30.5 meters, and you could do it all and still have a good width for bike lanes and sidewalks. You know, it means cutting down the median a little bit, etc. But I think it's something that you should really be pushing for, because it really would make a perfect route in that regard. So I wish you well in that, because I think it's badly needed. And I agree with the rest of the staff, and I agree with what Stuart said. There's been a lot of work in this, but I think tweaking it a little bit and being give and take on both sides between the active transportation network cross-section and the master transportation plan, I think we can have a pretty good system in place for residents now and well into the future.
So Roger, when I was contemplating what we might need to do to this, in the procedures manual that accompanies the bylaw, there is a section on section 3 on roads, that the street parking in the form of parking bays may be considered on all collector roads fronting commercial developments, recreational institutions, and schools at the discretion of the Director of Engineering. And I was going to suggest that we add to include provision for deliveries and utility pickups, because I've seen the same sort of issue that you're talking about, because there's no place for the mail van, there's no place for the garbage truck or the recycling truck to pull out of the way on some of those smaller streets. So I realize that in some cases they're stopping only momentarily and moving on, in which case it's no big issue. But I've also seen in other parts of the community, both in, I'm not sure if it was Saanich or Victoria, but also in Langford, for example, some of their narrow roads, when the garbage truck comes, he's just parked in that lane. And it doesn't matter that there's, 100 cars an hour that go through that road. He's just taking his time, and it's an apartment building, and he's going to be there for a while. And people just, wait till it's clear and go around the guy. Or if you were like me in Saanich or Victoria, whichever it was, you're late for your appointment because he's going to be doing that the whole way down that road, and there's no place to get by him.
You're correct for the old stuff. The new stuff in the land use bylaw, we require developers now to provide those types of facilities for onloading and offloading within their site.
Yeah.
So we got to live with the devil we have now, but we recognize that mistake, I don't know, sometime in the past. So all developments now have to actually have that facility on site for garbage pickup and deliveries and all of those things. So that discretionary piece for the Director of Engineering is the ability, if we need to do something supplementary for other reasons, like we think it's problematic for ongoing basis because of activity in the area, because if it's a commercial entity that might have a lot of traffic that's specific to a time and we feel like it's detrimental or problematic, then we can make that decision. So we have that in there with regards to the development itself to provide it, and then we have the ability at the discretion of staff to then add more if we want to with that thought. So
Does it make any difference how it's worded? That, you know,
The
that,
key is it's at discretion of the director of engineering, back to
Right.
the rules and the game. It's
But
our
it-
game, we make the rules and we pretty
are
well
you
get to.
limited by that it's for commercial developments, recreation, or schools, or you're not limited?
If
by
we
it?
saw it residentially, we can do the same thing. The scala parking can be converted to different things as well. So
Yeah,
we have the
yeah.
ability to make that change as
Because,
well.
you know, where I'm seeing these things happen, they are, well, some are very, well, they're newly renewed in Langford, I guess you would call them. But in other parts, like the San Victoria area I'm thinking of, it's an older neighborhood
Mhm.
that is just, you know, its character has changed over time.
Yeah, for sure. Sense.
All right, I'm going to stop talking and move on to Kim.
My question is around landscape irrigation. And I don't know, maybe Gord might have to chime in, but I guess I'm just wondering when do we provide irrigation in certain areas and when don't we? Like, when do we decide if it's just going to be dirt or maybe the grass if it gets water on it or what have you? And just in terms of another hat with sitting on the water commission, you know, I know that if we were to get our, um, we have lots of water, but if we were to conserve even more water, and they actually did a campaign of sorts or that sort of thing, and maybe we did native plants or desert landscaping like they do in Vegas. Excuse me. Like maybe there's a way that nobody wants to pay a huge water bill, so maybe there's a way that we can knock that down, but I don't know how do you weigh that with the people that love the trees and the shrubs and the whatever, and how do you get that balance? And I just wonder if that might even be something that our city could come out ahead of and say, you know, we're conserving less water and this is how we're doing it. I mean, I'd be happy, like I have irrigation in my lawn. I maybe retrospect, I wouldn't have put it in because at the end of the day, if I have to pay for it and it's costing a lot, you know, maybe it's better not to water it. So I don't know. I think in the summertime, that's where we come, you know, that's when that comes up a lot. So I was just curious how we decide that and with the plants for planting and that sort of thing.
Yeah, Gord, do you want to take this one? I think you might be the best.
Yeah, I can. I'm normally, and you can help me out with this one, Aaron, too, is normally we require city irrigation on city property. And I think in the bylaw now, we are looking at different ways of doing that. So whereas not requiring city irrigation in areas where frontages make more sense to have private irrigation on those, so the city doesn't have to irrigate. So the private citizen, the residents are kind of in control. They can water as much as they want within CRD, the CRD bylaw, as well as we, you know, where we do have irrigation, we don't always have to turn it on. So we're always looking at you know, more efficient ways to water. You know, we're not watering or we're not requiring spray heads in gardens anymore. We're doing drip irrigation for all garden, and that's in the bylaw as well. So where we have found efficient ways to water, we've included those in this bylaw, and where we can not require the city, you know, city irrigation, we're looking at that as well. So that's going to help in not having to have city irrigated land, allow residents, because some residents are absolutely okay with letting grass go dormant because it's not dying, it's going dormant in the summertime. Some residents are perfectly okay with that, where other residents want to water within that watering scheduled bylaw where, you know, they want to put as much water as they're allowed to put on. So allowing residents to be able to have private irrigation on city boulevards will help us in that regard as well. I don't know if you want to add anything to that, Aaron.
Yeah, no, well said. I was just gonna add on that we did add a couple of specification guidelines in here to basically not put irrigation heads in cul-de-sacs where you have those, you know, useless little triangles, because they just get damaged to no end. And as well, we put in kind of a minimum size boulevard that would not require irrigation. It's quite low. It's like 3 meters. We're gonna, you know, a 3 meter square area. So it's kind of a starting point to say, like, we don't need irrigation on those. And then, like Gord said, basically anything kind of behind where the sidewalk would be. So sidewalk is generally going to be at property line if we have our way. But sometimes it isn't. So if it's removed from the property line just a little bit, say 2 meters or so, then we would happily have the private property owners water up to the back of sidewalk. And then the city would water the boulevard between the sidewalk and curb. That's sort of our intent.
And I think I heard in that too, that you have the option of using or not using the irrigation that you're requiring. So in my experience, irrigation is kind of more necessary when you're establishing plantings, and then may not be so necessary thereafter. You know, once a tree is established, it may not need that irrigation, but you might want to continue to have the option to have the irrigation for severe drought summer or something.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, right now, with the bylaw the way it is, and we don't have irrigation in there, we're able to get trees from the developers, and we say, well, how are you going to establish the trees? And how are you going to grow the grass? So a lot of the times it leads us into saying, provide us an irrigation system so that we can establish that. And then, like you said, we can decide if we want to turn it off or dial it down. John just reminded me, like, we're going to have different zones. So, you know, there'll be a tree zone, a grass zone, a planting zone. So, you know, we can have a drip zone for the trees. So we make sure they're growing and they're not dying in the summer, whereas we can let the grass go dormant. So it gives us some flexibility there as well.
Yeah, I think that makes infinite sense. All right. Gosh, I'm falling behind again. There we go. Ashley.
Yeah, I might just run through all my comments. I think that feels easiest rather than jumping around. And I think I'll start with the street parking piece since it was just talked about. I live in Royal Bay and I think the stopping of the delivery trucks is what it is. I do think it would be nice to have like a temporary short-term parking spot near the community mailboxes, both for Canada Post and residents to grab their mail. Because if people are just parked there the whole time, you have to either double park or walk back later. But there are lots of people who do just park on the roads for hours, and it's really that grinds my gears. I do appreciate not having painted boulevards and the maintenance needed with that. I think more signs throughout, because I think people just I don't think they even register the sign at the entrance of the community. I think it just more kind of reminded throughout that might help with that. And then a question at the beginning in the bylaw section, section 4.4, it says, refers to substantial completion. Everywhere else it talks about substantial performance. I'm just wondering if I'm not sure what substantial completion is in the context here.
I mean, we're trying to follow the MMCD wording.
I think uses substantial performance.
Yeah, we should probably double check that.
Okay.
Thank you.
And then I just have general comments, so I'll probably just run through them mostly. In general conditions 1.3, for communities that that already have overhead services, either undergrounding or putting conduit for future undergrounding, if the power lines go out outside of Royal Bay, we still all go out because there isn't underground services out there. So future proofing it and having the conduit at least so it is an option later. And sanitary services, and maybe this is considered just in the sanitary master plan, but what I've heard in the community is a desire to extend and attach to municipal sewer. So I don't know if there's a minimum requirement or an expectation when the subdivision or development should be extending the sewer to reach a frontage rather than just connecting to it if it's there. But that might be helpful to help expand the system over time through development.
I think there's some cost implications to that. Generally speaking, extension of services to facilitate another house requires a financial outlay. So I don't know if you want to put that on. So that this subdivision is building out.
Yeah.
And its line goes to the end of its property.
Yeah.
But then the person next to that,
Yeah.
or 2 houses away, whichever it is, they have to negotiate with their neighbor to get them to pay for the, you know, whatever it is, 30 feet, 50 feet that's in front of that property, and then they pay for the 30 feet or the 50 feet that's in front of their property. So I'm just, I'm wanting to be mindful that we stick to what we're asking our developers to do, is to provide the services that are needed for the development that they're responsible for.
Yeah, and that's what I'm referring to. So like, for example, like there's a, say you're at Machosen and there's a sewer on Machosen, I have no idea. And then the road comes off Machosen and the sewer doesn't come down there. And the house is five houses down, say that you're doing a subdivision. You could require that subdivision to extend the service to their property line so they could connect to the main. And now that main is extended that far, they could do a latecomers for when anyone else connects to it.
Yep, that's
But
exactly,
I don't know
that's,
that that requirement lives anywhere, or if there's a minimum expectation to extend this.
Well, and there's some issues.
it's
with
the Local Government
latecomers,
Act
too.
and to the property line, basically, like the full frontage of that property.
I think that like if it's at Machosen and they're 5 houses down, I think you can require them to extend to their property line so they can connect. But as far as like when the municipality expects that to be done, like if it's 200, 500, a kilometer away, it's not reasonable. Like I don't know what the line of reasonable is. Maybe that is in the Local Government Act, but
So that actually is part of that subdivision process, and that's an approving officer delegation. And in that particular interest, the approving officer for the best interest of the community could make the developer do that as part of the subdivision application and have that service extended. When that service is extended, just like you said, they become the front ender to that build, and then they would get a latecomer opportunity for 15 years. Anybody that connects then pays that latecomer fee. So that is part of that macro conversation to get to the micro conversation.
Yeah.
So you're correct in how that works, for sure.
in the stormwater management section 4.1, I just didn't know if there was a consideration of covenants for private systems on fee simple land, if they're having infiltration or detention systems, especially when there's pumps. I know in our experience, like people don't necessarily know of or maintain them, so just a consideration. As far as the pervious surface, if another consideration is maybe where a property is already over 50% impervious surface, it was developed ahead of a bylaw and consideration of kind of good environmental standards, having a cap of a maximum of 50% runoff, something like that could be option. And then another, I don't know if groundwater is an issue in public, to be honest, but I think pumping of groundwater is a negative thing. So I don't know if there's any consideration that's been made to that. And then at the very end of section 4.25, it says add the following, and then there's nothing after it. So I think it looks like something's missing there.
2.5 of which section, sorry?
And stormwater management at the very end, 4.25.
You know what page you're on?
Sorry, one sec. Inspection chambers, page 31. So let's create a new section called inspection chambers and then add the following, and there's nothing after it, and it goes straight to roads.
Oh yeah, good catch.
And then just a couple more things. For the local road cross section, I don't know personally that it makes sense to have sidewalks on both sides of the road. It might make more sense to have a 2.5 or 3 meter sidewalk. That way you can have 2 strollers passing each other. And I, again, live in Royal Bay. One side of Caspian has lane, so clean sidewalk, no intersection points with vehicles, and you have the sidewalk on the other side as well that has driveways. So if you just have one wider sidewalk in a local neighborhood, that might be better in my opinion.
Yeah, and
Consider-
that's where the street atlas would again
Yeah.
help with that. So we can sort of dictate, okay, no, we want one side only at 2.2 meters or whatever.
Yeah.
We can put that right into the Excel sheet, and that kind of becomes the standard for that roadway.
Awesome. And then same, I mean, the ship's probably already sailed on the beach lands, local road standards, I assume. But if it isn't, same kind of thing, it's only 1.5 meter sidewalks on both sides, rather than having a smaller sidewalk on both sides, maybe a bigger sidewalk instead of 2.
Yeah, the beachlands, it has their own cross sections.
Yeah, and
that
they've
were
negotiated that already.
that. Pardon me.
That's already been part of the.
Yeah, it's gone through council already, and we have actually asked them to amend them to add in, you know, like the separated buffer between the bike lane and the sidewalk and other improvements we've asked them to make. But yeah.
And then again, Royal Bay, the light standards don't make much sense to me. Both, they seem like pedestrian light standards, and then they both go over the boulevard. I don't know if you pull it up if this makes sense. It's like one of the very last pages, but they're kind of shorter light posts, and they both face the street. So there's a shorter one and a taller one. But the lamp is facing the street on both sides, but it doesn't ever overhang the road, and it's never over the sidewalk. So
Yeah, no, it's a good point. I mean, their concept was they didn't want Cobra lighting in the sense of like David arms. And then, you know, the city wanted pedestrian lighting. So that was like the balances, like they've got the taller, what looked to be ornamental, and then the shorter ornamental. So yeah, I guess going forward, I think they've improved that, like in the Southlands, like where Tradewinds and all that is being built, they've improved that sort of. So we'll have to keep an eye on that.
Yeah, there's been a real graduation that's occurred, because the original design standards were approved back in 1999 and 2000. And then, you know, a lot of things have evolved since then. So, yeah, it's hard to know with a big development like that, where does the old stop and the new begin?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, those are my comments. The rest of it looks great. I think you guys have done an awesome job, and I think it'll be a useful document.
Yeah.
Okay. Don.
Well done. I just have a couple questions and a comment. Actually, is back to the irrigation for the city, and also to Ashley's comment around groundwater being pumped. Is there an issue with the water being pumped or used as irrigation rather than coming out of the municipal system through the pressurized system? So we're like, I'm looking at other jurisdictions and other cities that actually use groundwater irrigation systems, and whether that's cost prohibitive or maintenance prohibitive. Just wondering if that might be an option for those kinds of capabilities, still within the city control, but actually still just pumping out of the ground. Like I say, I don't think we have a problem with water right now, but you never know what the future looks like.
Yeah, I'm not certain about that. I don't know if you could speak to it, John.
Yeah, at this time, we haven't explored that opportunity to use groundwater systems.
We looked at it a long time ago, but the reality is that to utilize groundwater, you have to have a well. We did actually have a well dedicated to the city when Veterans Memorial Parkway was put through. It's sort of just up from Colwood Creek Park. Colwood Creek Park, yeah. And when we put in the splash pad, idea. We looked at whether or not we could use that groundwater, but it's not as simple as it sounds.
And
Oh,
our
understand, it's not
topography
simple.
with regards to rock and sand and gravel, having a perched aquifer somewhere that we might find it somewhere, but we could drill 30 holes before we found one that actually worked, and then it's in the area that we need. I think truly.
There's some inherent issues
Yeah.
with groundwater as well. Like there's a lot of aquifers that are being utilized for wells in Highlands and Machosen, and they're now becoming oversubscribed, and there's issues.
And I do think we're probably leaning towards getting away from aesthetic watering. So even if we were to explore that avenue, I'm not sure why we'd have isolated pockets of aesthetic watering and then have the rest of the town not. So, I mean, if council went in that direction, we'd certainly look at it, but at this time, staff's not looking at it.
Okay.
The reason I said having on groundwater, something on groundwater.
You need to use your mic here.
Oh, sorry.
All right. Okay, we're moving on to Stuart. Did I miss those more? Oh, I don't know what went wrong there.
Thank you.
There we go.
So I was interested in when you said that you can, in some cases, make the landowners do the irrigation, even though it may be on city property. Probably one of the significant things this committee could do would be to recommend absolutely minimizing the amount of city irrigation we have, especially on boulevards around town. I mean, the trouble with irrigating boulevards is that it so often comes in short little spurts. You know, somebody will do 100 meters of road, and that gives you need a power source, you need controllers, you need valves, you need somebody to maintain it, you need somebody to flush it out, you need somebody to do that. It just becomes a huge expense, especially compared to the additional expense to a homeowner who might be fronting that. I know in the first phases of Royal Bay, the design called for sleeves under the sidewalk so that the irrigation within the lot could be extended to the stuff between the sidewalk and the curb. So I would really like to see a push to minimize the amount of city irrigation. Just it's one of those things that's an ongoing expense once you put one in and own it, that adds up over time. And if we're looking for how to keep tax rates down and stuff, maybe not the primary focus of this committee, but never one to be shied away from. I would like to see us really push for that. I don't know if you think with what's in here now, you have the ability to, beat the irrigation down to its minimum, or do you think something would help if we passed a motion to that effect or something?
Yeah, I mean, I think the way it's written, it gives us the ability to enforce it, but I think it also gives us ability to not ask for it if we think that's appropriate. So it really depends again on the development and, yeah, exactly how much soft surface versus hard surface.
And I think it really depends too what our goals are. I don't think, probably in the last 10 years, I don't think I've seen a lot of push for a great deal of aesthetic works being done. There's been more concern about establishing trees and being able to put in infrastructure that will eventually sustain itself. A little bit of beautification, but then that was sort of Councillor Logan's thing. He's not here, so none of us are really. The flowers were kind of Councillor Logan's thing, and that being less of anyone else's shtick. I mean, we still have our baskets, and we still do our festivals and our banners. I mean, there's still a look and an aesthetic, but I haven't seen a lot of push for more irrigation, except in places where we're trying to establish trees or maintain things with climate change.
Yeah, I don't know if Gord would want to chime in on this, but I was just going to say, like, we would want to be careful with our trees, our boulevard trees, because we are, like you had said, the heat domes that we're experiencing are stressing the
Preparing for
trees.
climate change.
So if we had zero irrigation, we would have to go out and, water those by hand or have the gator bags. So there is that to consider
I see Gord is with us
separately from
now.
grass. Yeah, you want to add on to that, Gordon?
No, I mean, you're absolutely right. Trees, I don't think we would ever call for or ask for tree plantings without irrigation. I mean, I could see a time where we're not irrigating grass. We are definitely, this year is going to be a test for us. It's they're looking at a really low snowpack, and we might see some water changes finally here in the CRD. So yeah, trees are always going to need water, and we're always going to need that water there just in case. They will, will become mature and will fend for themselves. But when all of those, when we do have those heat systems come in, we need that water. Grass is another story. Beds are, it's always good to have the water there as well. We do do native plantings drought resistant plantings, deer resistant plantings, that sort of thing. So, but even those plantings are going to need water in severe drought. So yeah, I mean, we are going to be able to, as the part of Aaron's talk earlier, was this is a long time, and one of the things with landscaping and irrigation, it's been a long time coming, and we've learned quite a bit, and we've from when myself and Aaron were working on this years ago to now, we've put a lot of stuff in there with irrigation, landscaping, tree soil volume, all of that stuff, to really be able to deal with some of this drought and lack of water that we're going to have over the years. So yeah, that's pretty much all I had to add to it.
Great, thank you. Taylor, you're up.
I don't really know if this is a question or maybe a comment, but I think a common frustration and concern that people have is lost costs and the piecemeal approach that we take to infrastructure in the city right now. And just some of the comments that you're saying with respect to, we can get irrigation input by the developers, and we can use it and then we can turn it off. And we don't need to use it again. That's our choice. That's a wasted cost if we're not going to use it again for the lifespan of that irrigation system. And so, obviously it makes sense with respect to planting a tree. We need to make sure the tree is established and is cared for, but irrigation there for whether we want to water a boulevard or something like that seems so far in the background compared to all the other infrastructure issues that we have in this city with respect to bike lanes, roads, and sidewalks, that I just don't understand necessarily if this bylaw gives you the tools or sets up the expectation for developers and the rest of people in the city that we're taking a more fiscally responsible approach and structured approach to the way that we're going to develop our infrastructure. A perfect example in my mind is Sukin Veterans and the development that's put in 30 meters of bike lane that connects to nothing and 30 meters of sidewalk that connects to nothing. That just seems ridiculous to me that we are doing that when we have sidewalk networks that need to go in other places more urgently. And why are we not just taking those funds that they are required to contribute instead of turning them into something in a spot that is not necessary and putting them into a development somewhere that's appropriate? And I'm thinking the same thing with, again, irrigation. Why are we putting in irrigation if we're more likely going to turn it off than not? Why are we looking at putting trees on city boulevards instead of saying, put the trees on your property and you take care of them? That's the new development standard. We don't need a tree on a city boulevard for our cost, which also comes with maintenance and upkeep and replacement when it's damaged or a car crashes into it. The simple fact is that, I think and I'm thinking back to Roger's point, right? We're kind of cart before the horse, and Councillor Day's point, what are our goals? We don't even have these things approved. We don't even know what our current goals are. We have drafts, and we're putting into something in place that's going to be taking effect, very soon, and people are going to start acting on it very soon. And it just seems like we're setting ourselves up for a lot of waste and a lot of frustration as people see it unfold. And I'm not saying that updating this from 1995 is not totally necessary and a huge step. But my concern again is this waste and this piecemeal approach. And I'm even thinking with, you know, the road cutouts and the active transportation network plan that we have, and bike lanes and everything like that. We've seen other municipalities race with updating their bike lanes and how they're doing their active transportation network, Saanich, Victoria, Esquimalt. And there's a lot of cheer and happiness, and there's also a lot of frustration and, oh my God, why do we do this? And you know, I see it every single day that I drive to University of Victoria through multiple municipalities, and you see the bus pull into the buffered bike lane and cut off a biker without even thinking about it, because you know, that's another piece of you know, our transportation network that is reducing greenhouse gases, getting cars off the road, getting people to where they need to go, so on and so forth. So, you know, I'm really going back to Roger's point here, and it's like we are putting something into place that we don't even have the approved, updated plans, and it's frustrating, and then we're seeing it unfold in the developments that we see. You know, you go up Triangle Mountain, you see 10 meters of sidewalk in front of all the little subdivided houses, and they connect to nothing. And it's, why was that money spent there? It doesn't make sense.
So there's a couple things that I just want to jump in, because just in there's some things that seem so obvious and so common sense, and yet we can't do them. So where it comes to development that's coming into place and we ask them to put in sidewalk that maybe doesn't connect to anything, we can't take that money and spend it somewhere else. We can't. Well, maybe they can, but we can't. There is a whole long list of properties who have put money aside to put that sidewalk in front of their houses at some future date when there is going to be a sidewalk to connect to. And so I just want to, we're not perfect. I'm not trying to defend anything here, but there are like a whole bunch of limitations that we have that are just based on the way the legislation was written and the way that we have to interpret it. So that there are some parts that are limitation, and there are some parts that it's not there yet. So I just want to say that sometimes when we look at it and we just think none of this makes any sense, it's not always going to look the way it looks today. It's going to change over time. So in some places, yeah, we got things in a little too early, or sometimes we got them in late. When they were needed, 10 years ago, like sidewalks in front of the schools, for example. So we're been working on our approach to sidewalks and improving that infrastructure to try to make it as contiguous as possible in areas that make a lot of sense. So our first focus has been on school zones. So safe routes to school, adding the bike lanes close to that. And the next layer, I guess, that came after that was probably roads that are really dangerous to be on. So Souk Road that you mentioned, that, yes, we thought it's probably a good idea to put some sidewalk in, even though there isn't another piece of sidewalk that it's connecting to right away. There's other properties that have been through a rezoning process already, should be coming online pretty soon. Don't know exactly when that's going to be. And like John mentioned earlier, that, even though that part of Souk Road is maybe 2 lanes in the document that we have, we know that it's going to function probably as a 4-lane road eventually. So he's already requiring that. So some of it is going to look a little higgledy-piggledy at first and not completely make sense. And yes, absolutely, everybody should question that and wonder. But also putting street trees in the boulevards is going to make it so that it's way more pleasant to walk down that street when we're in a heat dome, that you can actually stand to be out there at some time. So there's going to be a lot of give and take in what we're trying to do. And if we don't use the irrigation maybe all the time, but having it in place allows us the opportunity to keep that street tree, even in spite of the heat dome that we're going through, and make that I mean, I think everybody, like, if we didn't have to think about our budgets and we picked a neighborhood where we would all like to live, it would be the expensive neighborhood with the big boulevards and the big street trees and all of the goodies in it. But we're trying to pick and choose to make that happen in Colwood in maybe an affordable way. And I'll certainly pass back the mic to you. I just wanted to make sure that we don't, we're all working towards the same goal here.
Yeah, thanks. And that makes sense. I'm just my own education. I'm curious what the legislation is that restricts us from how we can collect funds and use funds. A lot of what I've heard is we make our own rules. So if that's the case, then you know, it's our land, as you said, and it's our developments. What, you know, again, curious what just specifically what it is. That's just for my own piece. But the other side is, again, I'm hung up on the point that that we are setting out standards and asking for things. And I just want to make sure that we are not asking for enough or not asking for the right things, as we have these draft things that should hopefully be coming quickly. And again, I think there's a very significant reason to update this when it's 25 years old or 30 years old. And so I'm not opposed to that. I just want to make sure that if we're putting it out there on the street now with the amount of development that's going on right now, and that people are going to snatch up and act on, and developers are going to act on, that we're giving something that is meaningful, and we're not going to turn around in a year and go, shot ourselves in the foot for the last 12 months, bunch of waste, bunch of missed opportunities.
I think, you know, you rattled off a bunch of really good points there. And I like to think we get it right most of the time, but I know for me, I don't get it right all the time. And I'm not familiar with the 10-meter piece that you're talking about, and I don't know if that happened while I was here. Quite certainly possible. But we do look at, you know, what's coming up in the future, where it's coming from. A great example is Souk Road. We've got that townhouse unit right by Linlark that got built just recently. The condo and the apartment was supposed to be built like right away. And we were supposed to have a nice little piece there from Linlark to those 3 older properties. And then we realized, oh, those 3 older properties are starting to get something. So then we thought, okay, well, we got to put something in there for today to kind of protect them. And then, but we got to worry about tomorrow. So some of that is permanent. Some of that is temporary. So you'll see like a nice concrete sidewalk at the back of the property, and that's going to stay. And then you see that horrible looking paved surface right now that is an embarrassment to me, that it's sitting there because there's nothing done around it, and it looks like we don't know what we're doing. But now the next 3 properties have come knocking on the door. And the fact that we built that really ugly sidewalk at virtually a cost to get the people across the boulevard, so they're not in mud, they're not near the traffic. It's not going to be there 5 years now. It's probably going to be there 3 years, and we'll have a concrete sidewalk from 30 meters west of Linlark all the way to Veterans Memorial, because we did that little piece that looks like it's a bad idea right now. So there are some out there that probably were a bad idea and we missed, but there are some out there that are a good idea and it's coming. With regards to the funding, I'm a little cavalier with regards to, okay, we make the rules, we can do what we want. I mean, that's what I tell developers. This isn't recorded, so I can say that.
It is.
For the most part, we have rules and we have to do certain things. And like I say, they can push us on some of these rules, but time is of the essence with them. And we use that as our lever to get what we want for the citizens of Colwood. So if they push us legally, we may not be able to stand in everything we do, but they probably can't afford to do that because they got a lot of carrying costs and they have other things. And at the end of the day, they push and push and push, and then they generally back off. The funding aspect, that is legislative. There's certain ways we can spend funds and there's certain ways we can't spend funds. We can't take funds for roads and spend them on parks from a developer. And we have ways to do that through amenities and those kinds of things, but there are certain things, and that's more of a finance question with regards to what we can and can't do. Right now, what we do is a cash in lieu policy. So we'll take some money for works that you didn't complete that should be permanent, and then we won't take some money for works that you completed that is temporary, and we kind of make that that piece in between the two. And then when those other pieces go, we'll make that connection of that concrete sidewalk with the funds we took from them. And of course, if it happens 5 years later, we probably won't have enough money and we're gonna have to supplement because the cost of construction, money we took in 2018 is not paying for construction that's happening now in 2023. I mean, construction costs have almost doubled since then. So, we end up trying to help funds and try to keep taxes down by doing that and trying to foresee the future, but we don't get it right every time. So there is at times some waste, so I'd agree with that.
Right, Taylor.
Yeah, thanks, and that'll make sense. I mean, I guess maybe my final shot would be, maybe we want to be putting out a bylaw that is more steered towards those alternate means to spend money today when the dollar is worth what it's worth, and towards projects that are connecting and worthwhile today. Because again, this is just a frustration that people have and people don't know. And here I am asking the question because I don't fully understand, but it's beyond, I think, frustrating for most people in this town to drive by something and see 10 meters of sidewalk in front of a random house, no sidewalk for 2 kilometers, 10 meters of sidewalk in front of a random house, when we have these big pitch plans and big amenities throughout the city where maybe that money could be spent better. And again, we're putting this out, and this is what's going to drive our subdivision and development servicing moving forward, without the actual confirmed active transportation network plans and transportation master plan updates. It seems there's some risk there that we're going to go down a road that we're going to step away from, and there's going to be waste there. So yeah, with that, what you will, but thanks.
Kim.
I just want to quickly say that, he's got a point, because there's, the old neighborhoods, they don't get anything because there's no new development in their area to drive the funds to be able to support sidewalks and that sort of thing. So maybe we should ask the CRD how they do it, because they seem to be able to collect funds and then not use them for what they're collected for, or and not disperse them back and sort of things like that. So maybe there is a way legally around it. It just might help with future developments, and then with helping the older neighborhoods and it's stopping those little sidewalks, the little pieces like Taylor was mentioning. But thanks.
Yeah, I can't speak too much to that, but I am aware that legislatively regional government is under different rules and regulations than local governments are. So they have a lot more flexibility because they are, call them big brother. They're not mom and dad like the province, but they're the big brother to us. So there might be some ways to work around that. And there might be something that we can set up, and certainly that conversation I'll have with our director of finance to say, is there a way to perhaps be a little more flexible with regards to funding and the opportunity to use that? So, and I would note, we are trying to work towards with our sidewalk program to try to get some of these sidewalks into these smaller neighborhoods like Benhomer and Owens. So, little steps at a time, but I think council's doing a good job of trying to recognize that and doing what they can.
Yeah, for sure. Not seeing too many new speakers. I just wanted to jump in because I wanted to ask you, on page 4 of 5 of the report, it speaks to the GIS system. And the city is working to improve our mapping and GIS. I'm not sure if that's a correct way to speak of that, actually, but the GIS system has been being updated for a number of years. And when I have been looking at mapping of particular developments that are going forward, I quite often have been using the CRD system because it had a finer topographical image, well, not image, but finer lines. It was more specific than the one that Colwood is even working towards. I think Colwood's working towards like 5 feet between modulations on a topographical map, and I think the CRD is at 1 meter, which is 3 feet. So I don't know, but if the CRD system is already done and it's available to us, why aren't we just using the CRD system? Just as a cost savings, why don't we just use that?
Thank you for the question. Oh, my voice again. Pardon me. So our internal GIS is actually a little bit different than the outward facing GIS. So staff have access to a Colwood specific GIS, and that is being updated consistently and bettered. So Brian, the manager of GIS there, he's constantly getting layers from the CRD, from other sources and inputting it. So we actually use all of them. And hopefully, I think his goal in the hierarchy of his deliverables is to eventually have a more accurate outward facing GIS map as well. But we do work closely with the CRD, and it's just a matter of resources to like take some of their layers, add them to ours, use ours, and then it's that making sure that it's accurate before it all goes out. So I would say I appreciate the sort of frustration, or why does the CRD have this? Why are we trying to recreate it? In the end, we'll actually have a more accurate and representative GIS map for our community with our specific pieces.
Okay, well, that makes sense to me, because in other things, the CRD often does not understand Colwood specifically, which is, you know, kind of part of my frustration with the CRD. So I'll come back to you, Taylor.
This is just going back to the funding piece. It seems like we still don't have an answer as to specifically why we can't collect funds and use it in a certain way. It seems like we have an insight that CRD does it in some way. So I don't know how we leave it from this particular meeting, but Director of Finance, I think would be a good person to actually ask this question to, but also I think beyond that, having somebody maybe approach CRD and actually try to investigate what that is. And if it's a matter of, you know, it's the Municipalities Act that's maybe limiting it overall, then let's figure out how to make it work for us. Because again, I think we have a major infrastructure opportunity, but also problem right now with respect to all that needs to be done, and opportunity in the sense of all the development that's about to happen. And it just seems like we're setting ourselves up for a massive missed opportunity and a lot of waste to just get it as right as we can and not push to make it right for what we need it to be.
I just want to be clear. I do not know the answer to that question, but I'm quite certain that our Director of Finance, Janet, knows the answer to that
I
question.
know that she knows.
And knows the answer to why we can or we can't, or why we haven't or have, or what we can or can't do compared to the regional municipality. She won't need to go to the CRD. She just knows way more about it than me. So we can certainly look at that finance piece, but again, I would suggest that the finance piece isn't part of this bylaw. That's a macro piece compared to this micro piece. And that direction, I think, Councillor Day,
Yes. So
do we not have a finance committee that's now being established?
No, we don't have finance anymore, but we do certainly have the ability to bring that information back to this committee.
That's what I was gonna suggest.
All the members of this committee will understand what our limitations are and why they are.
Yeah.
But that for the purposes of this document's driving force is, are we asking for the right things to happen? And do we have the things that we need in place to ensure that they can happen for the future development? So we know that we want roads, sidewalks, and all of that infrastructure. This bylaw is putting forward how we're going to get those things. And in terms of, you know, whether this is the most economical way to achieve that system, that's a little bit different question that probably belongs more at council. But I do want to answer that question for members of this committee in terms of, because there is a relationship, you know, the more stuff we ask for, the more it costs developers to develop, the more it's gonna cost young people to get houses. So we want to make sure that what we're asking for is reasonable. And that it will eventually have a useful purpose. Whether that is an unesthetically pleasing piece of sidewalk that safely gets people without mud all over their pants between Linlark and VMP on Soup Road for the next 3 years, or if it's an aesthetically very pleasing and highly functional cement, beautiful concrete sidewalk at the property line where it should be contiguous with all the other properties that develop along there. But either way, whether it's this year, somebody walking along that road that needs to be safe and clean, or 5 years from now, every kid that wants to get to school and needs to use that portion of the roadway to do it, whether they're on their bike or walking. That's what we're driving at, short-term benefits and long-term benefits, both. All right, where am I at? I have a lot of people with their buttons going. There we go. Ashley.
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of, as a counter to the discussion that was just happening, just say my support for the bylaw as proposed. I think the subdivision and development servicing bylaw is intended to guide the design and specifications of those services that are being installed by developers, but doesn't dictate what is required. The requirements live in the Local Government Act and development process requirements. And this just sets out what the specifications of what we can ask for should look like when we do ask for it. So I think they're two separate things. I think the standards for the road network, if the transportation plan enhances them, they can be expanded on. The bylaw can be amended at a later date. I think having a set standard that is optimal now, rather than waiting 2 years until the transportation plan is done, is better than having to go back and amend the bylaw or just enforce a different standard at a later time. I think is fine. That's all.
Thank you. Don.
Thank you. And actually, I was going to say pretty much the same thing. One last question as well is, when you're looking at the active transportation plan and the longer term plans of the city, do you suspect or do you envision that there are going to be significant changes to what is going into this bylaw now? Because to comments earlier, it's maybe a little bit ahead of a couple of other items, but what is your risk that you're managing right now to put this forward to help you work your current life versus your future life?
You know, that's I don't know how to answer that really. You know, when I started putting bike lanes in 10 or 15 years ago, it was 1.2 meters in a painted line and we looked like heroes. And like 5 years later, it's like, what, 1.2 meters? It should be 1.5. And then 5 years later, it's like, how come these aren't buffered? How come they're not protected? So to answer your question, I think what we're trying to put in place here is some certainty that gives us a guiding document to move forward in the most assured way we can. And truly, the transportation master plan, I think the level of engagement we're going to get with the public and the competing interests, we could see a reasonable amount of shift, but I don't think we're going to see a shift away from alternative modes. I think we're going to, as a community, want to ride our bikes and see people get on the bus and see people walk and feel safe doing all of those things. So I think the protection element will be there, the buffering element will be there, some kind of width will be there. Now, whether it's two sides of the road or one, whether it's multi-use path, those things will change. But I think the tenets that we're putting in the bylaw will stay the same and just perhaps shift or be molded. So what we have now is none of those things in the bylaw that we have. So if you're asking me whether we're putting the cart before the horse, I don't think so. I just think at the end of the day, we might have a lot nicer cart a couple of years from now.
Well, I agree with you. I don't think we're putting the cart before the horse, but just in respect to everybody's comments and the feedback. Personally, I think it's a great document. It's come a long way from what you've had to work with so far, and that's good work. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, and Roger.
Not trying to beat a dead horse, But I'm back at the active transportation network plan and the master transportation plan. I would like to see the concept where we determine a road width, whether that be 3.5, 3.7 meters. I shudder at 3.2, but anyway, and then from that we work out. And if we come to the end and we're at the property line and we don't have quite enough room for a bike lane at 1.8 or a sidewalk at 2 meters or a separation line at 0.7, whatever, we look at squeezing those in a bit, because 3 observations I've made in the last year, and this may floor you. The other, about 3 months ago, I couldn't believe it. I saw an electric scooter in Machosen Road in traffic going along at 50 miles an hour, right in amongst the cars. So I look at that and say, okay, now we make bike lanes wider. It's going to be a drag strip for the bikes and the scooters. And I also have seen on Machosen Road 3 cyclists riding side by side on the 1 point. It wasn't, I went and measured it. It actually wasn't 1.8, it was 1.73 meters or something. So the wider we make those, the more problems we're going to have. They don't have licenses, you can't report them. And then 2 weeks ago, I saw a cyclist on Machosen Road in amongst electric bike, in amongst traffic, doing 50 kilometers an hour. So, you know, you'll be damned if you do, you'll be damned if you don't.
Oh, I know that.
And people being people, or idiots being idiots, you know, whatever you want to say, I think we really realistically have to look at a balance between them all. And I don't think coming to Brandstroff off all the time, driving on Ben Homer, driving on Owen, even with the scallops or push outs, cars are still doing 40 or 50 miles an hour along there, because I follow them just to see what speed they're doing. And they're going to branch drop off too. So is it effective? Yes, effective exactly where the scallop is. But once you get between that, they open it up. So it's not as effective in slowing traffic down as we may think. So I think there has to be, and you look at the costs involved with those, a lot more cement. And what is I'm finding it's doing, it's where in between the scallops where the cars are parked, which is fine. I have no problem with that. But an oncoming car forces you closer to the parked cars. And if a little child ever jumped out between that, you would never have a chance to stop because they're there right in front of you. So if you have a little greater distance between the parked cars and the line of traffic, at least you might be able to see them. So I'm of the opinion that maybe they aren't as safe as what the European model is saying, but who am I? Anyway, thank you, John.
Well, you're a member of the public and you're going to get your chance during the TMP process. And I think that's probably why it's going to be an 18-month to 2-year process, because I think council is going to spend the time and effort to make sure we hear from the public. And I think it's going to be a process that's going to be worthwhile in the end. So I think your points certainly bear consideration for sure.
Yeah, whatever we pick, I mean, you know that the public is going to do what they do, which is some of them will follow the rules, some of them will break them wildly, some of them won't be able to follow. That is how it goes. But I think it's good that we do the consultation, because we do want to hear many different perspectives, and where at least I think council is trying to get to is to take that concept of a safe community where you can be a pedestrian, where you can ride a bike, where you also are able to get through with a car in a reasonable way, and make it a reality. And that's not just easily done. It isn't just common sense, or, you know, there's some tricky spots. There really, really are. But I just wanted to bring you back to page 5 of 9 in the procedures manual that goes with the bylaw. And it's the road cross section service area map. And it has road classifications for the cross sections on it. And it has 2 different arterials and 2 different collector roads noted on it. One is collector multi-use, and there's 20 of them. and one is collector, and there's 20 of those. And then there's arterial where we have 30 of them and it's red. And there's arterial where we have 25 of them and it's green. And in that description that confuses the heck out of me, Mechosen Road is largely a green arterial, but then becomes a blue collector road once you get past Latoria Boulevard. Do you know where I am
Yeah.
looking? It was the
Page 5 of
attachment,
9 for.
page
the-
5 of 9, the
procedures
procedures manual that goes with the bylaw. So under our agenda, it's the, and I had to remind myself where it was. So there's the report, and then there's appendix A and B, and then appendix C is the works and procedures manual.
Yep.
The supplement to bylaw 2000. So that is where it has the nice bits in it about subject to the director of engineering being happy with the parking bays or in front of schools and commercial districts and so forth in it. It's only 5 pages long, so it's not enormous. But I was just trying to understand, is there something wrong with our map? Do we need to fix it? Are we confused? Like, what does that mean, the map on page 5?
Well, so first off, the 30, the 20, the 20 in the brackets.
Oh, there, she's brought it up for you on the screen.
The numbers in the brackets, so it says 30, 20,
Yeah.
25, those are actually meters. So that's
Okay.
intended to be the width of the right of way.
Okay. I
Yeah.
see, I see.
So that's a differentiation. So like Mechosen starts out as green. It'll be the 25 meter. And then once you get across Souk Road, it basically changes use. It's no longer an arterial there. It becomes a local. Right, once you get
Okay,
across Souk Road.
and so that it was my issue, was because for me, whether it's an arterial road has more to, at least in my brain, and I'm not saying that has to be correct, but it has to do with the purpose of the road, right? It's a road
Yeah,
that
vehicle
connects.
demand. Yeah. How many vehicles per day?
Yeah, exactly. So as an arterial road, I think it's important that it's maintained as a road of significance in Colwood that is often, I mean, it may not be faster, but it's certainly more direct, and certainly for cycling and pedestrian use, it's a lower grade than the ones that go over parts of Triangle Mountain and things like that. So certainly from Cot Lotus to Kelly, it is the ideal cycle pedestrian commuter route, at least in that area. There's of course the big hill coming down into the beachlands in Royal Bay. But it is also a major connector for communities outside of Colwood. East Souk and Mechosen are often using that road as well. So I'm just wondering, is this needing to be updated, or is it consistent, or am I have my own ideas.
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's consistent with what we have right now in the transportation master plan. But it also, we have projected some of the local roads and where we think collector roads should be. So it's really a reason why it's in the procedures manual is it's a guideline. It's a reference for the designers to go, okay, where am I in the city? Oh, should be a collector road. And that gives them a starting point that then will point them to the appropriate cross section in the bylaw. This is by no means like not going to change, or it's not part of the bylaw. It's outside of it. So it's a reference.
So it can be updated.
Yes.
Okay. And is there anything in the bylaw that would inhibit the development of Mechosen Road as a larger, a higher capacity roadway?
I mean, it just comes down to the classification of the road and what we agree it to be,
Okay,
right? Like this is showing that it is an arterial road and it's a 25-meter right of way. Which will allow, I would say, up to 3 to 4 lanes.
Okay.
Right? So then when you take the next step to the 30-meter arterial, now we're talking about Soup Road and VMP, where we may have to expect 4 to 5 lanes potentially. So that's the difference.
okay. Perfect. Just trying to wrap my head around some of the comments that I've heard from other members of council and just in terms of where we need to get to and whether we're putting any roadblocks up for ourselves. Awesome. Thank you. That was it for me. And Dawn.
Maybe from a constituent, I'll answer the question around that. This is all looking at the city's needs. However, when you look at that residential area and the chosen road, you now have the requirement to be buying people's property because they are up to that road. So if you want to extend your width out, you now have those costs from a city perspective to actually have to purchase that land because it's not yours.
Yes.
Expropriating is one way to get voted out by all means, but you can do it. I was in Calgary when they expanded out a lot of Glenmore Trail and such, and there was an enormous cost to the city to build that Glenmore Trail out, and it was very much needed, but it wasn't an enormous expense that Colwood probably couldn't afford.
Well, I think there's a lot to things are kind of being done a little bit differently, at least differently than they were being done. And I think that cost will be something that actually gets put on development because it wouldn't just be pushing a road through what exists there now. It more likely would be development wanting to occur along the sides of that road because it's a transportation corridor, because there is this new directive from the province to try to get more development to occur. So as we densify as a community, I think those areas are going to be coming to the forefront, and it's going to change a lot of things. Then some will be for better and some won't be for better. But we have to find a way to make it work because we already have a huge amount of development that's been approved that is going to have to get through there, and transit that's going to have to get through there. All right, next, Taylor.
Just a question building on that. And to better understand this, does this road classification inform the type of development that can occur there, such that Metchosin Road being identified as an arterial with 25-meter width, somebody redevelops a number of properties, are they not developing up to where that theoretical 25-meter would be, even though it is not 25 meters today? In the event that down the road, when we want to potentially expropriate or otherwise, we're not looking at expropriating a building, we're looking at expropriating empty land because we planned accordingly for what is going to come.
Well, like for instance, let's pretend that Metchosin Road is 20 meters all the way up. And there's a development that's under rezoning. That's where city goes and grabs extra road dedication as part of that rezoning requirement, which would then get us to the 25 meters theoretically. So unfortunately, it's all a timing thing, because then if you're relying on that method, you have to wait for every property to redevelop and rezone to grab that property. Right.
Yeah. Aaron's correct. I just want to add the piece that council is right now working with staff on a traffic model to determine our traffic flow throughout the city. One of those questions that they're going to have to deal with is Latoria, VMP, Souk, Metchosin. We're doing corridor studies in Souk. We're doing corridor studies in Metchosin. Those studies, along with that traffic model that we're building currently, will help council inform a decision on what direction they want to take. And then through that, what land asks they're going to want from developers. So we'll put in front of council options. Here's what a 20-meter Machosen right of way can look like with regards to infrastructure within it. Here's what a 23, here's what a 26 looks like. This is the consequence to those properties. There's properties on Machosen. If you drive Machosen, there's utility poles all over the place. So there's issues with that, but the goal is to inform council with those decisions with regards to the cost of that, like expropriation, potentially you can have properties that no longer will be able to function as they currently serve. So then that'll make them want to be development. Those are big macro questions that will help inform council with regards to, and then that helps us. And we will at some point change this map to reflect those questions. Machosen is going to be minimum a collector arterial regardless of what we decide. It's going to have a lot of traffic on it. Same with Latoria. It doesn't matter what we decide to do there. Ultimately, there's still going to be a lot of traffic on those roads. They're all going to function like collectors and arterials. So it's just going to help again with that 2-year process and developers coming in. So what staff's currently doing is we're being conservative. We're taking, when developers are coming in on Machosen, we're telling them that we're likely, if they come in, we're asking for 3 meters of land. And we can always give it back, but we can't take it later. So right now we're taking it, and if they push back, then the plan is we come to council and say they're pushing back. Do you want? Because if you say no to this, then expropriation or denial of a road build comes in the future. So my first line is no. I want the land. Recently in Beachlands, we took some land from them because we think we might need a roundabout at Machosen on Latoria. We don't know. So they were just subdivision right now. So went to the developer and said, you already subdivided. I'm asking you to give us a little more land for a right of way. So I didn't ask for the land, but I got a right of way because they had already subdivided. They complied with that so that if we decide to put a roundabout there 20 years from now, we have the ability to do so. And if the traffic model tells us we don't need it, we can release the SRW and they get their land back. So we can do tools like that as well with developers. And we're just trying to make sure that we don't handcuff council with regards to decisions moving forward. So I'm not sure it's saying we're going to get it right every time, but we're trying to.
Roger.
John, before you sit down, any chance that this committee could have a demonstration of the traffic modeling? Because I think it would sure help us in making better decisions.
Yes, there's a chance. If council tells us to do it, we'll do it. So I suspect at some point you'll see something like that. I mean, it would make sense to me. So we just got to get a few more things for council to consider so they're driving the process, right? So they understand what they've got in front of them. And when we get to that point where the model's developed, I'm quite certain that'll be part of that process for sure.
And Kim.
I just wanted to follow that up, Roger, with that because of the traffic modeling, we're able to actually make a really informed decision. So I'm really pleased that we have that available. And, one of our tasks that we did as a council was to try to make a roadway and design it. And it wasn't as easy as you would think it would be. So
thank you for
there's
that.
lots to think about. And I think that, in regards to the public and residents and that sort of thing, I think if we have the modeling and the data that shows what makes sense, then we're golden there, I think, with forging ahead and with those decisions and just making a decision off the cuff of what we think might work. So I'm really pleased that we have that. So thank you.
All right. John, did you have something you wanted to add?
No, I'm just hoping we get a recommendation, and I'm
That
here to make
is
sure that
exactly
we have a
what
chance
I
at that.
am thinking of from the committee. I would like to get a motion from the committee to council with a recommendation in regards to the Subdivision and Development Servicing Bylaw 2000. And I've heard a lot of things, and I know staff has heard a lot of things. Is there something that you feel needs to be spelled out to staff, or is there anything staff would like us to spell out clearly?
I think we've got good direction. I think the one piece and whatever the committee's comfortable with, I'm more than happy to take back as advice to come back on the next meeting in April. The finance question with regards to how we get around and taking cash in lieu. Other than that, I think the committee understands that this is an iterative process even in itself and that we're going to see edits. The committee is going to be part of that edits. I think the committee sees that the TMP process and the traffic model is going to inform us with those decisions coming up in the future. And those are all decisions that this committee, with regards to their terms of reference, will be part of. So we're just hoping to provide a little more certainty with the adoption of the bylaw, recognizing that there will be some amendments, not 30 years from now, but perhaps a lot sooner than 30 months from now.
Roger. Oh, okay, Kim. Oh, just one second.
Sorry, I just wanted to, I know this might seem unusual and I'm not sure, but is it possible that if we make the motion and move forward with it, that maybe everybody could submit their 3 things that they stated, not to move forward with, just so that it's there and council can read it when it goes forward, that these sort of ideas were brought forward and mentioned, and this is what their thought process was. I don't know if that's helpful or not, like.
Yeah, I think that is helpful just from the point of view of sometimes it's easy to sit here and say what you think. It's really hard to action that if it isn't coming as a motion, we want you to X, Y, or Z. And so if we aren't going to X, Y, or Z them with here's our amendments that we would like, then I think if there's something that you feel really passionate about and you want council to think about, let's put that in some writing so that council can hear it and see it from you. John, did you have something you wanted to add?
Yeah, I mean, that's a path to take, and I think that could provide some value. But what I really was thinking would be better is what I've found tonight is I don't think there's anybody sitting at this table that hasn't actually spent some time on this bylaw. I mean, you guys are picking up some stuff. I'm going, okay, they've read this bylaw, but we've also had a lot of discussion tonight. So I think you probably have some opinions that you don't fully have fleshed out yet. So I'm wondering if in April, we come back and get together a list of, let's have a conversation. Let's bring forward some of the points we brought, because you've heard countering opinions to what you've said yourselves, and use that kind of time to go, okay, what are some of the things I really want to emphasize? And now I've got some more information to put a few more bullet points to it. Because if you're going to start one-offing, like I'd like my one thing, I'd like my one thing, we're probably going to get to some of them where it's like, well, I don't think we should. I think we should.
Yeah.
And in April, you'll have some ability to kind of, let's bring it to the meeting ahead of time so people can think about it before they actually make those decisions. So just a suggestion that might allow us to, because we're going to amend this thing anyways. And even if we amend it before then, and before the transportation master plan, because there's some other things, like perhaps we can do something with cash and lead, we can make an amendment 6 months from now, 9 months from now. It's not that difficult to do that.
Okay, I will hear from the committee then. Roger.
Thank you. I think I can support this motion, but with the definite understanding that of all the cross sections of the road, none of those measurements are fixed. In other words, if you take this cross section where it says, well, the sidewalk or whatever, bike lane or the traffic lane has to be this, I'm saying I couldn't support it. But if it's flexible within that cross section or that design or that plan, I can accept it.
I think council always has that ability. I mean, that's the reality. Sometimes we don't have the road width that we'd like to have.
No, I understand that, but
Yeah.
I'm putting support behind the motion, but with the definitive understanding that those numbers can be changed to accommodate whatever the road width is. So we maintain a safe driving lane.
Stuart.
Thank you. So understood that we've talked about a number of things here today, and I think it's been heard by staff. That's good. The one sort of big issue on my list that hasn't been hit on yet, and probably on this committee, I'll be a broken record on this thing, is one of the huge natural advantages that Colwood has is the ground that it sits on, the permeability of the ground and the ability to, in this, for this specifically for this, for disposing of and treating of stormwater. And in this document, there's references to it. I understand that, staff knows it's there and it's kind of thing. I just wonder if Colwood specific infiltration design and construction specifications shouldn't be strengthened. In my opinion, there's a map in here and it talks about area A being the area of the permeable soils in Colwood. And I guess I would think it would be to Colwood's advantage to state that in this area A, the stormwater treatment and disposal will be by infiltration, except at the discretion of the director of engineering. There may be places where it doesn't work or it's not appropriate. But I just think that the ability to do that is still underutilized in this town, even though, that's what happened to the water from time immemorial. It hit the ground, it went down through that thing, and we all know it all pops out in springs down by the lagoon and a certain elevation where it's not permeable anymore. But that's what the water's always done. And when trying to mimic natural systems as close as you can come is good. So that's one thing that we haven't had a chance to chat about tonight. And I guess when you say have a few things that you'd like to write down or pass on or be considered before this went forward, that's high on my list. So.
Yeah, well, Stuart, just to that point, I actually had Amanda print this out and I put one at everybody's place because for me, that is the piece that's missing in all of the planning documents and everything that I've ever looked at about Colwood. I have never seen anything that identifies what the natural systems are, where they are, or what they're doing. So there's a stormwater system that's the pipes and culverts and ditches and catch basins that we made and maintain. But there's this natural system that's, I don't know, under the white paper in all the maps that we have of Colwood that has never been really quantified except for a few blue lines that occasionally get forgotten off maps where the creeks and streams are and where the lakes are, but we don't really have very much information. And I'm trying not to overwhelm or slow down everything, but to put my hand up and say, and we need to remember that we need to know about these things because they'd be really easy to mess up and make, no longer functional through development or hardening of the surface area or creating dams or diversions in the land, etc. And I just want to try to find a way. I know that we can't, we have to walk before we can run, but to try to integrate that into our understanding of Colwood. And Stuart, you just mentioned it so well by understanding specifically where that is, that it's in these soils that's called Area A. And, that was the one part that I know where the water goes. I know where the historical problems are because I have the human history of the pioneers from Colwood because I've lived here for a long time. And, I'm sure there's deficits in what I know because I met who I met and I heard what I heard, or saw what I saw, but there's lots to learn. So we're all kind of at our different points of understanding and let's try to make them scientific and able to be passed on from one generation to the next. Ashley.
Having worked with a bylaw like this, and stormwater management is something that I have been keenly interested in. I think it does say that already, the bylaw. It says for on-site stormwater management and ground stormwater infiltration works are required, where a geotechnical investigation confirms the permeability of the soil to dispose the stormwater. So I do believe it's covered in there. I don't know if that was the intent of that or if I'm misinterpreting it, and then it says where the soil is not suitable, detention works are required prior to discharge to the storm system. Section 4.21.
But I've seen a lot of
Yeah.
changes that indicate we don't really understand it all that well.
Okay.
And just the history of the land, right? Weird things happen, especially when you clear cut areas and then, you know.
Totally. And I think, I mean, that's generally what the geotechnical report will offer and kind of provide, in my experience, but, yeah, I had my hand up more so to the motion, and I think I don't want to delay the approval of the bylaw. I think making a motion that it could, like, obviously nothing's going to happen in 2 weeks. The agenda's basically got to go forward at this point anyways. So I don't know if maybe the motion can include something like that is supported and recommended, providing council with maybe the minutes, that consideration to some of these specific comments be made for future amendments or something along those lines. It's a poorly worded way of it. But...
I think we all understand that this committee is going to keep on working on these issues, right? It's this is where staff got us to so far. They're heading, nobody's saying, you guys are idiots, we're not listening to you. They're hearing us. So we're going to keep working together. What I'm hearing around the table seems to be that we are, I heard from Roger that we're pretty comfortable because staff have told us that where we have to amend the widths, that's going to be done to work within the area that we have to work with. And I heard Stuart mentioning where it is identified and that he's going to keep on bringing that up. Staff have said they're going to bring back more information on how we use the funding that we get for sidewalks and infrastructure with development, so that we can all better understand that, and that this committee is going to try to keep working towards what our next amendments to this bylaw might be and bringing that forward with staff when we meet again in April as well, because all of our documents are kind of all talking about different aspects of the same elephant, right? One's got the leg, one's got the tail, it's still an elephant. And so what I feel that I'm hearing around the table is support for the bylaw going forward as it's been presented to us, and us continuing to work with staff to refine it and bring forward further amendments as we're able to work the details out.
Yeah, I mean, that makes perfect sense to me. And some of the things we've discussed tonight, you're gonna have to put a recommendation to council to spend some money on them. If we're gonna do a creek and water course inventory with regards to where they are and what they are, that's gonna cost some money. So that's gonna have to be funded through council, and that currently isn't part of the 5-year financial plan. Things like the infiltration question and that we can proof out a little more, but as of today, on a site-by-site basis, we do look at those types of things and see if that's an avenue that we can proceed with. And certainly on-site, it's being done lots with regards to on-site, and then off-site with regards to the roadworks. It hasn't been done that much so far in the developments that we've done, because it's been more of a formal area where we couldn't do it. And it's been in an area where it's already been somewhat developed, so it was hard to put in an infiltration gallery. I know Stuart knows what that is. So that kind of direction we can certainly take into consideration as well, and then figure out what this committee's role is with regards to looking at that and how we bring that forward.
Okay. So who wants to put their name on the motion? Okay. Oh, sorry. Keep having to use this thing.
Sorry to cut in there. John, do you think would you see this going forward as written tonight to council, or would you think some of the stuff you've heard tonight would warrant tweaks before it went to council?
If I'm being honest, I'd like this to go as it sits this evening. I think we're starting to muddy the waters. I don't feel comfortable with regards to being able to tell council, yeah, I like that idea, or I don't like that idea. I've heard a lot of interesting ideas that I think merit consideration. I'm not sure I've heard anything where I 100% stand behind that, because, you know, I fully appreciate what Roger's talking about lane widths, but I think there's a lot of people out there that want different lane widths than that lane widths. And I think there's, I've heard conversation about sidewalks just on one side instead of two sides, and that's public engagement stuff. That's not technical stuff. And I didn't really hear anything here tonight that said to me, oh, technically we're wrong and technically we need to change. I have heard that, hey, there's some tweaking to do and there's some things we'd like to see. But this committee doesn't have the authority to make those tweaks. They only have the authority to make those recommendations, which means if it goes to council with recommendations, then again, it can get held up. So, you know, from a staff perspective and certainty, I'd love to just see a recommendation with the committee continue to work on it and then putting forward amendments sometime in the future. And if that's 3-6 months from now, that's when it is. But at least we have a bylaw that we can amend. But again, you know, whatever the committee decides, I can support and we'll work with that from a staff perspective.
Okay, thank you. Did you want a motion? Sorry. My love.
I'd like to move the motion.
Okay, and your motion is?
Where is it? I guess to that the infrastructure committee consider proposed subdivision and development servicing bylaw number 2024 and provide recommendation to council. And then maybe add in that
The committee will continue to work and identify future amendments.
exactly. Yeah.
Does that sit well? Rest of the committee? All right, is anyone opposed to the motion? Anyone opposed? Excellent, that is carried. All right, we will meet again in April. And next I'm looking for a motion to adjourn. All right, moved by Roger. All in favor? We are adjourned. Thank you for listening to all our points of view and all of you for staying so late on a Tuesday night. Much appreciated having all of the input. It's a huge responsibility and I really appreciate having you share it.